a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farmer, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 6 and I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is the home of common sense. Welcome to the start of yet another week. It's a glorious day out there, even though you can't really tell it because you're so freezing cold as you get out of the car or get on your bike or whichever forward transport you decide to use. It's coming up to something like 1 degree. Every weekend I keep thinking spring is on the way, and apparently actually might be by the end of the week. There's some stories this morning telling us that it's going to be 17 degrees on Friday. We'll come back to that over the course of the show. Emma Wolf is here to help us look through the morning papers. Very good morning to you, Emma. And it's all about Keir Starmer. He's managed to make himself the front page on most of the papers this morning. The front page of the Daily Mail says Starmer flies into defence storm. He's off to Paris this morning to go and see if he can persuade anybody in Europe that he's got an idea in his head. Starmer ready to put troops in Ukraine is one idea he's got. That's on the front page of the Telegraph. Apparently he thinks that we can have some kind of peacekeeping force keeping the peace once the peace has been declared between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, there's a big meeting going on in Saudi Arabia today with the Russian Sergei Lavrov and with the Secretary of State in America, Marco Rubio. They're meeting in Saudi Arabia. There's nobody from Ukraine who's going to be there, and nobody from Europe is going to be there either. Meanwhile, Starmer wants to be a bridge to Trump, says the Times. And, of course, the best story of the day on the front page of The Sun is prawn crackers. As Putin's threat grows, Chancellor dithers over extra pounds for defence. Yet, we blow billions on crazy projects like shrimp farms in Bangladesh. This is our version of Elon Musk's Doge, it turns out. We don't have anybody in government doing it, so The Sun's doing it, which is brilliant. We'll be telling you all about that coming up. Also, there's all kinds of worries about the Attorney General, who is, of course, Lord Hermer, otherwise known as Lord Harmer. That's what I like to call him. Cabinet knives are out for him. He also now turns out represented not only people who were involved in 9/11 and Jerry Adams and Shamima Begum and various other lowly characters from the various worlds of terrorism around the globe. He also represented somebody who once plotted to blow up Manchester and who is currently serving time in a high security prison in America for life for being a terrorist? What is it with these Labour lawyers who want to represent terrorists, who want to blow people up who happen to be British? What's wrong with them? 0344 499 1000. I predicted last week that he'd be out of a job by Easter. There's a cabinet reshuffle coming. Rachel Reeves might be out of a job by Easter as well, the way things are going. We've got so much going on. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, have a listen to this.
Yeah. Morning, Mike. I'm fuming this morning.
Morning, Mike. Simon in North Wales.
Hi, Mike. Jane from Kidderminster here.
Hi, Mike. Jill from Northampton here. Love waking up with you at 6 o'clock on my TV.
Morning, Mike. Fantastic shows always.
We've got a long way to go, but it's going to be all right.
Yeah, it's not going to be all right yet, though, because Keir Starmer thinks he's some kind of cross between Winston Churchill and Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know what he thinks he's doing. He thinks he's got some kind of great military might around him. We haven't got much of an army. We've got more illegal migrants here than we've got members of the British Army. So the idea that we're going to somehow be peacekeepers in Ukraine is a joke. And I think many of you, from your reactions on social media overnight after I suggested that this was absolute and utter madness, don't want anything to do with it. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Six minutes past 6 as this government limps on into what is almost the end of February, and we're getting into March now, which I guess will be, what, month 8, I suppose, of their tenure. You know, I can't quite believe my eyes when I see on the front pages this morning, Emma, Keir Starmer trying to make himself out to be some kind of international statesman. You know, he's sort of shuttle diplomacy. I mean, you know, he doesn't have the qualifications to run his own country. Now he thinks he can run everybody else's.
Well, he's doing the classic thing of avoiding any of the issues. He doesn't like being confronted. He doesn't like explaining himself. He doesn't like difficult questions. So he's spent the last, 8 months basically not being in this country, avoiding running away from farmers, running away from protests or difficult questions or valid questions about, you know, where did you get those glasses? Where did you get that money? Where did you get this, that and the other? So we, as you say, we limp into month 8.
What's going on with the voice coach?
What is actually going... Yeah, what is actually... Have we... No, no answers to any of that.
Yeah.
And you know what? We were wrong. We said from the beginning, oh, it's all going to be OK. He'll be out within weeks because this can't go on. And it has gone on. And I think we're going to go month by month and count this 5 years down because he probably will limp on.
No, I mean, I never thought he'd be out in weeks. I just don't think he'll last. I mean, that's always been my line. I mean, I just don't think he'll last. And I think he won't last until the next election, that's for sure.
I hope not. I hope not. Anyway, this is now. So Europe is having a tantrum because Trump is actually doing something.
Yes.
Trump is actually taking action. And guess what? The European leaders don't like it.
No.
So having done nothing and nothing and nothing...
They're all clutching their pearls, weren't they? J.D. Vance told them all that they were
having their secret little Paris emergency summit.
Yeah.
And Keir Starmer says it's absolutely fine. I'll pop over to Washington, I'll sort it all out.
Yeah.
Well, what plan does he have?
Yeah, exactly right. Well, we saw at the weekend, didn't we, Donald Trump being asked about whether or not they were going to have a conversation here in Starmer, and he said, I don't know what we're going to talk about. He asked for the meeting.
Yep.
I didn't.
Yep.
So, which makes him look even more hapless, right? But according to his piece, he's written a piece actually for The Telegraph this morning. He says, we are facing a once-in-a-generation moment for the collective security of our continent. Well, he doesn't seem to worry about the collective security of our country, given the number of people being allowed into it on small boats, big boats, you know, RNLI boats, any boat you like, Border Force boats. He doesn't seem to care about the security of his own country. And he wants to lie about things that happen when Islamists decide to start knifing people to death. He doesn't want us to know anything about it. You know, so one, he's a complete hypocrite. He wants to secure a lasting peace in Ukraine that safeguards its sovereignty for the long term. Well, how about a lasting peace in this country that will guarantee our sovereignty and our safety for a long term?
Absolutely. Well, I think so many of us feel, not only on foreign aid, or what are we spending 15 billion on foreign aid that we are sending abroad, not only for crackers, completely ludicrous projects.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to that in a minute.
Yeah, that we'll look at later on. But even just the fact that we are sending these billions abroad and we can't spend a few million on things like pensioners, farmers, anybody else, children, anything else in this country. But wasn't it Lord Dannatt on Saturday in the Sunday papers who was saying, well, this man is basically for the dustbin?
Yeah, he is.
Literally for the dustbin
of history,
given the state of our armed forces. So as you point out, we don't have a functioning army. So where are we going to find these?
We've got more illegal migrants in this country than we've got members of the British Army. So, I mean, that's your first statistic.
So where are we going to find this wonderful peacekeeping force once we've established peace in Ukraine.
How
and
dare
Russia.
he actually? I mean, it's not like in the United States of America where the president is actually, you know, the chief of all the armed forces. I mean, he's basically in charge of that. The prime minister of this country really isn't. I mean, he can't start ordering troops around. You know, do you think he's Tony Blair going to start another war somewhere?
And also, have you noticed this creeping back to Europe thing?
Yeah.
I mean, there was something called Brexit, which did actually happen.
Yeah.
And he's unravelling it by stealth now. He's back in doing all the summits and all the dinners and all of this stuff. Political integrate, you know, we need to check what he's actually doing out there, what he's actually saying. Yeah. Because we did actually have a democratic vote.
Exactly right. And while you got people sort of cowering about J.D. Vance's speech and how he told them all, you know, the main threat that you've got is for your free speech here, amongst other things. He's going to talk about, we'll show you what he said about illegal migrants in a moment. But, you know, even as he was speaking, you know, shortly before he spoke, an Afghan migrant ran down a load of people in the very same part of Munich where the security conference was going on. And then the next day, another Syrian migrant stabbed and killed a 14-year-old boy, amongst others, in a sort of rampage in Austria. You know, so the idea that somehow, you know, everything in Europe is hunky-dory and we don't need any lessons for America. Well, you do, actually. Let's have a look at this. J.D. Vance talking on illegal migrants.
It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants.
And there you have it. In a nutshell. Why has no European leader ever said that?
Why are the European leaders, why is Europe in denial? Well, no, not Europe. Why are the leaders in denial about this? Or just pretending it's not happening? Or just refusing to name the cultures and the, you know, the people that we have an issue with, who hate our culture, who are coming here and causing death and violence every single week.
Exactly right. And the guy in Syria, there's a terrible picture of him, which we saw at the weekends, is in some of the papers this morning, of him just smiling. You know, as if he's very pleased with himself, having killed an innocent 14-year-old boy.
And more, and many more deaths.
Unbelievable. Here's what Salmans also writes in the Telegraph. The UK is ready to play a leading role in accelerating work on security guarantees for Ukraine. This includes further support for Ukraine's military, where the UK has already committed £3 billion a year until at least 2030. First of all, we haven't got the troops. Second of all, we haven't got the money.
We haven't got the money.
You know, why is he saying all this? I mean, he made a statement at the weekend saying, oh, we have to tax the farmers and we have to get money off them because otherwise, how else are we going to solve the crisis in the NHS? Huh?
And we're talking tiny amounts that you're going to get off these people and cause terrible, terrible hardship to them. It's exactly the same with pensioners and winter fuel allowance, isn't it? These tiny amounts attacking people of this country who've worked for this country all their lives, many of whom have fought for this country, and he does not give a damn.
And these are the people who pay his wages, by the way. It also means being ready and willing to contribute to security guarantees to Ukraine by putting our own troops on the ground if necessary.
But do you know how people in this country actually feel? They feel, why are we sending? Why is it more important to secure peace in Ukraine? Why is it more important to spend that money, to send this money abroad constantly, rather than investing here first, and looking after people here first?
That's all. Ridiculous.
It's not that Brits care about the rest of the world.
Well, no, but this is the reason that we argue.
In our country are suffering.
Right. But also, this is why we argue about Ukraine all the time, because, you know, people who don't think we should be continually supporting a country which, one, is corrupt to begin with. You know, let's not forget, Ukraine is not exactly, you know, the whiter-than-white country that's been invaded by the bad guys. You know, it is a country in and of itself, which has had an awful lot of political turmoil
and it's
over
not
the years.
It's not Putin apologism to point that out.
No, it's
not as though we're on the side of Russia.
No, of course not. I'm not saying that.
It is their problem, first and foremost.
But no, the point is this, right? They are have been in receipt of bucket loads, billions and billions of pounds from both this country and Europe and the United States. We've given them loads of weaponry, you know, but it's all going into a black hole. It's just disappearing. And
Zelensky has been on a world tour, hasn't he? A sort of you know, fundraising world tour.
And people say, well, just give them enough money so they can win. Well, that's never never going to happen. They're never going to beat Russia. No. So they're much better off than going down the Trump route, having
which
a meeting
is actual talk
in Saudi Arabia, talking about peace, figuring it all out.
Yes,
and if
working it all out, having talks.
Zelensky doesn't like it, then he's going to be the one that has to fight the rest of the war on his own.
Yes.
Simple as that. Because without British help, without American help, and without European help, he's going to be defeated. So he's better off taking the deal than he is being left isolated on his own. But let's move to that story in The Sun. Squanderful world, it says inside on pages 8 and 9. UK's 15 billion foreign aid lunacy. And this is like the Elon Musk Doge stuff from last week, where he discovered that USAID was giving money, amongst other things, to Rory Stewart's wife.
Yes.
Right, so that they could run basket weaving classes for Afghan women.
And my current heroine, Caroline Levitt, who comes out with these lists. I mean, she doesn't even need to send. He just reads out the list of these crazy. What was it? Condoms to Uganda? No,
I think it was condoms to Gaza, wasn't it?
To Gaza. I mean, well, much crazier. Much crazier.
Famine. We'll have a look at this. So here's the list that we've got here in The Sun. A fleet of electric Porsches for Albanian jails, 500,000 quid. Women's Affairs Director for the military of Jordan, 500,000 quid. Transforming feminist funding in Iraq, £5 million. Studying shrimp health in Bangladesh, 133,000. Inclusive green enterprises in India, 114 million rather. Studying disinformation in Ethiopia, 264,000. And my favourite, accountability and inclusion in the Congo, 9.5 million.
Millions of pounds.
Inclusion?
Millions.
Accountability? There's a war going on there, I think.
You haven't even touched on all these gay porn research projects that cost millions and millions. I mean, it is actually, it's funny,
but criminal.
It's funny, but it's actually obscene.
Great work by The Sun, by the way. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. You can see it there if you're watching.
Yeah, the Doge movement in this country, though, is ramping up.
Yeah.
People are starting to say, hang on a minute, millions and millions on this stuff.
Yeah.
What is going on?
But there are two places...
It's such a lack of... Not only is it unbelievably wasteful that our governments successively have thought this is okay, but it's incredibly disrespectful to the taxpayers' money, to the sense of we pay money into this country, we have to pay our taxes. Where is it all going?
Yeah, well, lots of it's going to places abroad, it would seem, which is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Mind you, not everybody is quite bought into this, let's get rid of the DEI mob, because there's a story in one of the papers today saying that campus spending on DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, has hit £28 million in the last year. So they're still up for it. The public sector in this country is also still pushing for it.
They're still obsessed with it. You see it everywhere.
Yeah.
You see it constantly, DEI. You just see... Well, I mean,
the private sector has disappeared with it, though. They've become fed up with it, so they're not doing it anymore. But let's have a look. There was a lot of action for Donald Trump at the weekend. He went down to NASCAR, Daytona, I think it was, in Florida. And one of the things that's great about Donald Trump is everybody loves him.
Yep.
No matter what people in Europe say, and they all look a bit distasteful. Here he is on Air Force One, coming off Air Force One, and he goes to the NASCAR racetrack and actually drove around the Daytona 500 racetrack in the Beast, which is, of course, the big... there it is. They just drove it around, and people were cheering. Absolutely incredible stuff. He took his granddaughter, and people were... it's just a very patriotic country.
He is a brilliant man. I'm
Isn't
sorry.
He? Yeah. Well, he's absolutely...
Distasteful in many ways, and, possibly, not trustworthy, all of that. But he's doing what he said. He looks happy.
Whenever anybody says to me, he's not a very nice man, can't really trust what he says. What, like every other politician's a nice man? And you can trust what he says? I'd rather deal with Trump than Starmer.
Of course. Oh no, 100%. And we need. I mean, I think I was here on the day of the inauguration, and we were saying that we need a Trump. We absolutely need a Trump, and we need. And I'm impressed with JD Vance as well. After that speech,
I think he's very good.
I, give him a lot more respect than I did previously. No, absolutely. I think he's brilliant. And you can see that Trump, what he's doing is working, and he's happy. Whereas look at our Prime Minister, and Starmer is a very, very unhappy man. But look at Trump. He's having fun there.
Yeah.
He's actually having fun. Taking his granddaughter out, whereas, I mean, Starmer almost denies the existence of his entire family, his children. He scuttles around, back doors here, running away from farmers.
Well, the problem with Starmer is whenever he goes out into the public gaze, he gets shouted at and he gets heckled.
Exactly.
Trump gets cheered,
yes.
And that's the difference. And that's the bit that the lefties will never understand.
Well, But Trump is being authentic. He's doing what he says, and he's being who he is.
Yeah.
Whereas Starmer, I still think, is living a lie, and we mustn't go into any deeper into that.
Well, there's something very strange about him.
But there's something that isn't right at all.
Yeah.
There's something very, very dishonest that's going to at some point have to come out.
I agree. Something will happen.
Lies.
Coming up, though, we'll talk some more about the trouble for Starmer, because there was a lot of talk at the weekend of a reshuffle coming up. Even John Rentoul, our favourite man from The Independent, has been saying that he might now have to recant his idea that basically Rachel Reeves is going to stay in the job, because it turns out now that he doesn't even believe it. So we'll find out what that's all about. Also, we'll talk about the new blasphemy law by the back door. We'll talk about the NHS as well, because believe it or not, you're going to be told later on today by this government that they've cut back on the waiting lists. But they haven't really. It's all smoke and mirrors. 6:20. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
The dangerous thing is when we have people like Ashley, second in charge to the NHS and other health services, we get things like, you know, asking men if they're pregnant before they get X-rayed. It's just those are the real life consequences of putting someone in power who's got this weird, messed up, woke, loony mindset. And it is, you know, it's not funny, Simon.
Yeah, but it's like,
you might be laughing because you're a male.
She says trans women are women. They're not.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:23, I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is Morning Glory. It's a home of common sense right here at Talk. Emma Wolf is here. Just apropos of nothing at all, I'm just going to read this headline out because it amuses me. Probably shouldn't amuse me. Front page of the Daily Mail, they do these things at the top called blurbs, right? Yep. I cured my menopausal rage by taking magic mushrooms at a £5,000 luxury retreat. Tells you everything's wrong with this country, doesn't it?
Literally.
I'm sorry, you know, what on earth is that all about?
Oh, well.
Menopausal rage. I'm probably going to upset a lot of women now.
But also, anybody who's going to cure any rage by going to a £5,000 luxury retreat. I mean, that's really relaxing, and normal life isn't. And so
taking
I went,
magic mushrooms.
Magic mushrooms. Oh, every woman is doing this. I don't know a single woman who's taking magic. Well, unless all my friends are I don't know.
Maybe they just aren't telling you. Yeah.
Who is this woman?
I'm sure there's lots of women who have got more money than sense who are taking them, spending 5,000 quid
floating around in a cloud of psilocybin or whatever they call it.
Maybe get a job. Maybe get a job and see if you can cure your menopausal rage that way. Anyway, let's talk about some of the other big stories of the morning. Telegraph's got it on page 1, but it goes inside as well. Lord Hermer, who every time I read about him now...
All I can say is wrong. Everything about this man is wrong.
Absolutely right. I mean, he seems to now have a collection of clients. And again, it's always... They always go, oh, you know, they have to represent some people that you might not like. Yeah, but why is it that everyone he seems to be representing seems to have had something to do with terrorism and wanting to do harm to this country? The latest is an Islamist terrorist who was days away from carrying out a bombing attack on a Manchester shopping centre. The MI5 were basically prosecuting him. They had a case against him. He was running an Al-Qaeda terror cell in the northeast. Lord Hermer described their case as pitiful and far-fetched in order to get him off.
What is wrong with this man?
It's very, very clearly...
And these dodgy links with Chagos as well, the Chagos deal. Yeah, as you say, he represented the jihadi bride, Shamima Begum, Jerry Adams as well.
From the IRA,
now this guy, Abid Nasir, who is literally serving, isn't he serving in the US jail?
Yeah, full life term in US jail because they thought him to be seriously dangerous enough to lock up.
And it's one thing to say, OK, lawyers have to take on all sorts of cases. This is our Attorney General.
Yeah.
And he's not answering questions either.
No.
Starmer won't answer questions about it.
And there's another story in the Mail.
And they are very close, aren't they?
Well, they're best mates.
Good pals.
Yeah, no, when Starmer was running the CPS...
When he was at KC or QC.
Yeah, when he was running the CPS, Harmer was his sort of... his bosom buddy, as it were.
Harmer and Starmer.
Harmer and Starmer, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Mail's got a version of the story basically saying that the Cabinet have got it in for him as well, because not only is he a man with a bit of a dodgy past, but basically he's hopeless as Attorney General, and they call him the anti-government office rather than AG for Attorney General, because he puts the block on things all the time.
Block on things.
And he's also had to kind of recuse himself occasionally from giving advice to the government because of a previous conflict of interest. He's absolutely unfit for service, this man.
He's not fit to be Attorney General.
No.
It's so clear.
No.
And the thing is about this reshuffle, he won't reshuffle. We would need Starmer to be reshuffled out, but he won't be. He won't. And I'm hoping he gets rid of Reeves, but will he? I mean, there is just such a tissue of lies in her.
But they're all liars. I mean,
in her previous career, she is totally unfitted. So we've got an Attorney General and a Chancellor who are totally, and a Foreign Secretary, by the way, who are totally unfitted to be doing their job.
Absolutely.
If David Lammy was any good, why wouldn't he be jetting over to the Paris talk?
Lammy put out a tweet yesterday, right, about the Munich Security Conference because he was at that, and he didn't even manage to get the Twitter handle right for the Munich Security Council. He actually got it wrong. And you think to yourself, you know, you're the Foreign Minister, even if you're not actually putting that tweet out yourself, whoever's doing it for you is an idiot. You know, because the one thing you should try and get right is the name of the conference you're actually attending. I mean, that's how thick this bloke is. Absolutely unbelievable. Also, I managed to catch question time.
And then Angela Rayner. I mean, one just despairs.
Yeah.
Meeting the King the other day.
Worse than that.
Trumping along in front of the King in her clown shoes, in her, what do you call them, brothel creepers?
Brothel creepers.
It was just totally... And they'd fled London. The Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister had just rushed out of London because there were thousands of farmers in Westminster, in Whitehall.
And they had to find somewhere else to go.
They had to go somewhere else,
Exactly right. Yeah, so I managed to I didn't get to see Question Time on Thursday night. It was a little bit late for me, so I watched it on Friday night, right? And there was Jackie Smith, you know, formerly of the Blair
over that one as well.
Cabinet, defending Rachel Reeves, right? Who, by the way, is now the subject of an inquiry because a backbench Tory MP has asked Lloyds to produce the expenses report that they did on her, which should be very interesting, you know, when it comes out. Because one of the reasons that they decided to actually follow her, they actually followed her to see what she was doing, because she wasn't at work quite a lot of the time. Turned out she was doing like Labour Party business when she was supposed to be working for HBOS. And you think to yourself, you know, what job have you ever had where your employer actually was so distrusting of you that they sent somebody to follow you? to see what you're up to. You know, it's very stinky. But Jackie Smith, of course, the woman who pretended that she lived in her sister's home in London, so that she could claim all the expenses on the second home in the Midlands, which was actually the real home, including her husband's porn movies, including a barbecue set, including a new television, including all sorts of money. And they're putting her up as the woman who's the ethics chief of the Labour Party to defend her. I mean, forget about it.
It stinks to high heaven. It makes Sue Gray look like a sort of, paragon of virtue.
Absolutely. And now let's talk about Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State for Education. Story in the Mail today.
I can't.
Page 5.
This woman.
She's awful.
She knows nothing about education. She knows nothing about schools.
Right.
She knows nothing about what she's just done.
Right.
And what she has just done is wreak havoc across the system.
And caused the system actually even more money, because Labour's VAT grab has forced this one particular girl, and she's not the only one, we know there's loads of them, for out of private school, fees went up by £3,270.
Mid-year, suddenly in the middle of the year.
And guess what? There's no school to put her in, so now a council has got to fund her £8,000 taxi bill.
Yeah.
Well done, Bridget Phillipson. Congratulations, tremendous work. What a complete moron.
Waste of money. This is happening all over the country, and actually it's really, really unpleasant and disruptive for children. It isn't just about the cost.
No.
Rip children out of school in the middle of the year, so this came in January. This was fully predicted. So many of us were saying, hang on a minute, where are all these children going to go? Oh, well, it's only a small increase. No, it's actually not. If you're asking parents who are absolutely at the limit of what they can afford, £20,000 a year, £24,000 a year, that goes up to £30,000 a year. I know so many parents who are just about managing to do the private school thing because they care about it, they want to. Now they can't do £30,000.
Exactly. So instead, this girl is called Sarah Lambert, £42 a day to go 25 miles to the other school.
So that's fun for her. She's in a taxi for 25 miles a day. This is madness.
Well, 25 miles, I guess, there and back. It's 25 miles each way.
This is not normal for children's education.
No. It's really not. And once again...
And what's going on with councils having to find schools in different boroughs and different counties? It's absolutely ludicrous.
The Times did the story a couple of weeks ago saying that, more and more state schools are now finding that they don't have any space. So, because supposedly the new teachers were going to be supplied by this money that they're getting, it's not happening.
But there was never any guarantee that money... Well, the money's not going to come anyway because people are leaving the private schools. But there was no guarantee the money was actually going to go directly into state schools. And the teachers aren't available. Teachers are leaving the profession. They don't want to do it. They're not paid enough. The conditions are appalling.
Well, we don't want to give them any more money either.
No, we don't want to give them any more money. But you have parents, yelling at teachers. I mean, it's not a fun profession to be in necessarily.
Unless you like a lot of holidays, in which case go for it. It's not that bad. I mean, people who go into teaching do it because of the holidays. An awful lot of them.
Yeah, of course
because
they do.
They like to have all that time off.
It works for their lives. And there are some great teachers, and there are some appalling teachers, just like nurses and doctors. It's not a sacred cow
Listen, I wouldn't
thing.
want to do it, but the people who do it should do it with the best of their ability, as opposed to complaining about it and going on strike every 5 minutes.
Of course. But when the government says, "Oh, we'll just get more teachers," just in the middle of January, just get where from? Where are you going to get them from?
Well, they're not going to get them.
They take a while to train up.
A couple of tweets for you that have come in. Simon from Essex says, "Morning, Mike. 100 billion has disappeared. Half of the weapons have gone to the cartels, and our enemy's Stalin is a disgrace. J.D. Vance is a future president. What a great speech. Ukraine is a money laundering scheme. Read the book, follow the money. This goes on before the war." Well, this is the problem. The money. Nobody knows where all the money's going. And Zoe in Lancashire says, "I think the best thing that Starmer can do is stay far away from anything that involves our involvement in any other country. He needs to crawl to Donald and do as he is told by a professional. He's an incompetent idiot that should be kept on a very short lead." Yeah, we'll see if we can find that clip actually of Donald Trump being asked about when he's going to see Starmer.
Do we have a date? Do we know exactly when he's going out to Washington?
I think the suggestion is he might be going later this week.
Yeah, but
But I mean, there's nothing written down.
Because I think probably Trump's trying to find half an hour, maybe. Well, someone's trying to find half an hour in Trump's diary, but he's just got more important things to do.
Yeah, no, I'm sure Trump will see him, but he's seeing loads of world leaders. I mean, he saw the King of Jordan the other day, and Starmer was obsessed with being the first European leader to see him, when in fact Giorgia Meloni was at the inauguration.
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter anyway.
We're probably higher up the list than Starmer is.
Yeah, I know. It's 6:33. Emma Wolf is here. We've got many, many more stories to do, including, of course, what we want to talk about coming up, the NHS, because they're going to try and pull the wool over your eyes later on today, the government, and tell you that the NHS is doing really, really well since they got in. But I'll tell you what the truth of that is coming up next, right here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. We've got much to do. As I say, you're going to be hearing from the government over the course of the day about how well they're doing with the NHS, because they're claiming basically 2 million extra people have been seen since they got into power. But they also claim that the waiting lists have shrunk by something like 230-odd thousand people, right? Which means that it's dropped down, as far as they're concerned, from something like 7.5 million to 7.25 million, which is really not very much of a drop at all. Also, they're comparing apples and oranges, because they're basically saying for the same period last year, when there was a lot of NHS strikes on, so more people have been seen than the same period last year because they're not actually on strike. And they've admitted that they ended the strike, and that's partially what's helped the situation, because they've given them all 23 billion quid in pay rises. So the NHS, I'm sure you can help me out with this, ladies and gentlemen out there. If you've suddenly found the NHS has suddenly become more efficient, do let me know. If you're still waiting, however, for a treatment, which you probably are, you can also let me know about that. You know, they haven't fixed the NHS.
Of course they haven't.
They haven't made any inroads at all, but they're going to boast about having done it because they think they can play around with the figures.
No, they're really fiddling with the figures on this one. Has anyone listening been into an NHS hospital recently? Have you actually waited for an appointment or an A&E crisis?
Yeah.
And we've been hearing about that for the last few weeks, about the usual winter crisis and don't go to A&E and all of this stuff.
Right.
Such a dishonest way of skewing the figures, actually, and also to claim that it's the second half of last year, as though when they came in on July the 4th or 5th, they magically fixed everything and it was all fine. As you say, to compare it with the previous year when we had rolling strikes, is completely dishonest.
It really is, and I mean, much of it as well has been put down to people working at weekends and diagnostic centres being open longer, which is something I've been arguing for about the best part of the last 5 years. It's like, why don't they work at weekends?
Exactly.
So they haven't really done anything other than they basically bribed the people who work for the NHS and given them £23 billion, which they've gone straight into their pockets to try and make them work harder.
Well, they can lie all they want, but the fact is the NHS isn't something that you can kind of pull the wool over people's eyes with, because they're using it every day. Everyone is in daily contact with, kind of healthcare and things like that.
Yeah,
so
of course.
They know the reality.
You want to mention the front page of the Express?
Yeah, front page of the Express, farmers driven to the brink of despair. And I think, the last few weeks we've seen a really, really concerted effort from the farmers to stand up to the government and to say, and of course they've been ignored. They've literally been ignored.
Yeah.
The tractors that you saw driving down Whitehall, that was a huge, demonstration.
Incredible.
They all came here. They came into central London.
Right?
Thousands. They left at, 3, 4 in the morning on one of the coldest, bleakest days of the year. Anyway, this is mental health helpline, and I'm not into mental health, but this is the mental health helpline. Farmers Safety Foundation is talking about 55% leap in demand for counselling services, crisis help for farmers who are literally being driven to considering suicide. One farmer said it's really affected people's mental health because it's constant. It's that weight on your chest every day. He said we're not all rich landlords. We don't have millions and millions of pounds.
And how many more times will the government have to be told this before they actually admit that they've made a mistake about the numbers? Because the farmers have said, look, if you want to go after the people who are making money simply by owning land, that's one thing. But what you've done is captured more people than you should have done who are just trying to run a business.
They are just trying to reason with them, and working farmers do not have millions of pounds. They don't have cash, do they?
No.
They have a lot of assets and they often have a lot of land.
Exactly.
And they work incredibly hard. And they produce food for this country, for goodness sake.
I know.
And they're not, demonstrably, they're not all wealthy. Lots of them are literally scratching a living.
And again, looking at that story, Prawn Crackers in the Sun, about the waste of government money in the billions and billions of pounds, 15 billion. They're going to collect about 500 million, so £500 million from the farmers,
if that,
which is not even likely to be a drop in the ocean. I think somebody said to me it would keep the NHS going for half a day. I mean, it's such a small amount of money.
Well, it's like the pensioners thing, which I keep bringing up. It's so many people suffering.
It's ideological, isn't it?
Suffering on a tiny, tiny scale that they just don't care about. And actually, they won't collect 500 million because many family farms will just fold. They won't be able to. You know, when the old grandfather and the old father dies, they won't be able to stump up 40 grand tax bills and things like that because they don't have that kind of money.
No, exactly. Absolutely shocking. Let's talk
about...
And
then we'll import the food and pay loads on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Stupid.
They make no sense. Nothing that they do makes any sense at all. Let's talk about heat pumps because that doesn't make any sense either. Two stories on this. In the Telegraph today, heat pumps will never be cheaper than gas boilers. And this is from the boss of a company actually selling the same technology, right? Government wants the majority of homes to switch to heat pumps to meet its net zero goals by 2050. However, it has said it will not set a deadline to end the sale of gas boilers until heat pumps are cheaper. For households, it costs around £12,000 to put one of these things in without subsidies, compared to about £2,000 for a gas boiler.
And this is, as you say, the boss of one of these heat pump companies, and he says basically a heat pump is a very complex, you know, mechanism, and a boiler is really straightforward. A boiler is a flame, and it heats up the water, and a heat pump is really complex. Well, well done, Sherlock. Exactly. And that's why gas boilers work really well. And all this net zero madness, absolute nonsense.
It really is.
And you have to subsidise it to the tune of £7.5 grand. So it's going to cost, as you say, 12
Well, we discovered a story last week because somebody rang in with it, that all sorts of councils up and down the country are installing heat pumps into social housing and into council houses without anybody asking for them, at a huge cost to the taxpayer, right? And a huge cost to the council as well, because they're all being subsidised. Because if you're on benefits, you get it installed for free, right?
Of course you do.
So if you're in social housing, you get it installed for free, whether you want it or not. And they're not being installed properly either, so they don't even work.
So, Mike, when your heat pump breaks down, you call the local plumber. He's not going to come and fix that. He will not.
He won't know how to.
Squat about that.
Right.
He knows how to fix your boiler.
You're going to like this one, right? In Parliament, they've been trying to install heat pumps.
Oh, give me a break.
Right?
What, Parliament that has basically got sewage floating around the basement?
Exactly. But they've decided to suspend the installation of heat pumps because apparently they're too noisy and they're too unreliable. So in Parliament, the people who want us to all get one don't want to get any where they work.
And I bet they don't have them in their own homes.
No, they don't.
Or if they do, someone else paid for them to be installed.
Well, I think I'm right in saying Carla Denyer was on Question Time one night, who's the leader of the Green Party, who admitted that she didn't have a heat pump, but she's been receiving emails from companies about putting one in. But she still doesn't have one, right? So a planned rollout of heat pumps in Parliament has been paused amid concerns over their noise and effectiveness. There are 3 air source heat pumps in the House of Commons buildings, but no new installations have been made since 2022. A report seen by the Telegraph into the feasibility of installing a new heat pump into Portcullis House raised significant concerns over their acoustics and power supply. They don't work. I mean, how many people do you need to be told that they don't work?
And boilers do.
They're rubbish.
Yeah. Your boiler breaks down once a year and it's a pain, and then the plumber comes out and fixes it. And heat pumps are complex. I mean, this guy says they are very complex pieces of mechanism.
It's like the demented sort of invention of some green maniac who said anything but a gas boiler. We mustn't use fossil fuels. So they invent this useless sort of, you know, device which doesn't work.
And why not invest in looking at ways of making gas boilers more eco-friendly? Because everybody has them, you know. I mean, it's just
there's no substitute for a gas boiler. They're brilliant.
It literally is a flame
and they're
heating
really
up the hot water.
It's like diesel cars now. Diesel cars are now so clean that they're actually less polluting than an electric car. But yet, the people who hate cars want to outlaw them.
This obsession with EVs, when we know that A, we don't have enough charging points, B, they wreck the roads, C, you chuck them away after a few, D, they don't drive longer than, you know, further than your local corner shop.
Right.
For goodness sake.
I mean, I had a bit of a sort of eureka, not so much a eureka moment, but a sort of a light bulb moment, I suppose. I was driving around, taking the dog to the beach at the weekend, and I was driving past one of the many building works that's going on around the southeast of England, right? They're building houses literally everywhere, right? You can't move for house building projects. But people say, oh, we're not building any houses. Well, they bleeding well are in Sussex, you know, everywhere you go. And they had this sign up outside this massive, you know, ghastly kind of estate that was being put together. And it said, we are members of the Considerate Constructors Organisation.
Oh, yeah,
And I just thought, No, you're not.
No, you're
You can't just put a sign up and say you consider it. You have to show that you're actually considerate. And when, digging up half the countryside is not considerate. Having lorries go in and out of polluting roads is not considerate.
The roads.
Right. And it struck me that we are now living in a country where they think if you put a sign up, like be kind on the underground, everybody's going to be kind. No. If you're going to put a sign up saying considerate constructors, you're considerate. No, you're not.
That considerate constructors thing has been on building sites for years, actually, and it is so ridiculous. You've got people starting work at 4 in the morning.
Yeah, right. Drilling all day.
Drilling all day. Yeah. Digging up roads and leaving them for months on end without doing anything. I mean, I know I say this every time I come in, but I cycle through the centre of the City of London.
Yeah.
Moorgate has been a dump, literally. Moorgate, City of London, all of the central, which is meant to be the kind of
the flagship sort of part of Britain,
of the capital city of this country, and it's such a kind of totem of what is wrong.
I was same in Covent Garden. They've got these roads which are completely closed off to traffic. So
it's meant to be a tourist.
Yeah. You can't get a taxi to drop you somewhere outside of a restaurant. The roads are all being dug up. You can see the pipes are all kind of,
It is appalling. I have never seen roadworks this bad in our capital city.
I don't know what they're doing. I really don't. This from Sonia. Morning, Mike. Well, Trump must be laughing so hard. Starmer trying to act like a great statesman while running away from farmers like a rabbit. I would laugh, but this man is our Prime Minister. How embarrassing. Well, let's have a look. I think we've got the clip on Donald Trump talking about his upcoming visit from the Prime Minister. Let's see what he had to say.
I just signed a letter to him. He asked for a meeting, and I agreed to the meeting. We're going to have a friendly meeting. Very good. We have a lot of good things going on. But he asked to come and see me, and I just accepted his asking.
Do you have a date for that, sir? And what do you hope to
Very soon. I think he wants to come next week or the week after.
And what do you hope to discuss?
I don't know. It was his request, not mine. But, I've met him twice already. We get along very well. He's a very nice guy.
You just know it's just patronising one thing after another. Unbelievable stuff. Emma Wolf is here. It's coming up to 6:47. We've still got plenty to talk about, including how prisoners are apparently making weapons inside a prison from their laptops. Why have they got laptops? They're in prison. This is Talk.
Inevitably, when you've given up your the mainstay of your artillery, which was the AS-90, to Ukraine, when you've given them your tanks, Storm Shadow missiles, and so many other munitions, and of course a vast amount that we've helped to procure internationally. Of course, that has an impact on the ability of your own armed forces. When I became Shadow Defence Secretary, I said to Labour, you've got to increase defence spending now. I was Defence Procurement Minister. I came up with a lot of the detail of our plan to get to 2.5%. And what was really strong about it was it gave multi-year certainty to the MOD.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 10 minutes to 7. We are here, of course, for 4 glorious hours every single weekday morning from 6 until 10 for your delectation. People keep asking me, I've got one tweet here that says, you know, how much coffee do you drink to be so wide awake in the morning? I don't drink any coffee at all, actually. It's purely down to my incredible stamina and good living, which allows me to wake up
I'm always amazed
when I'm ready, you know.
I'm always amazed, Mike, that you don't drink coffee, because most people, I drink one decaf before the show, and it is quite, you know, it's quite necessary to drink something.
But decaf doesn't really do anything for you,
No, it
does
has no caffeine in it at all. But I'm always astonished. You drink a lot of water and maybe a banana.
Yeah.
But in 4 hours, you really must have a lot of energy to keep going.
Well, the trick is just to make sure that you get enough sleep and to make sure that when you wake up...
I know, but people think, you know, radio and TV is sort of just chatting on air, but actually it takes a lot of energy. You feel quite knackered after it.
Yeah, I don't actually. I mean, it's never bothered me. I mean, people used to say, I mean, remember it,
Mike goes for a 20-mile run after
I know, I don't do
show.
that. Maybe that's the secret, because I don't go expanding my energy elsewhere. You know, I don't suddenly go running.
What's the point?
Or go to a gym or go swimming or anything like that.
No.
I get my exercise here. But anyway, let's get back to the matter at hand. We want to talk about prisoners making weapons from laptops. There's a story in the Mail, page 18. This is Feltham Young Offenders Institution. My first question is, I know there'll be plenty of people from the soft left going, well, of course you have to give them some incentive to get out of the jail and do something decent, so you have to give them a laptop. Why don't you have the laptops in a controlled area, so like a library,
like a library,
right? They go in and use the laptop
for
under supervision,
yes,
with perhaps somebody teaching them something. You never know.
Not emailing people in, you know, Afghanistan or watching porn,
right,
or you know,
or ripping them open and making shards of metal out of them so they can stab people.
Well, I'm old-fashioned. I've always thought it's absolutely outrageous that prisoners have televisions in their cells, that they have comfy cells, that they go and... No, I mean, it's fair enough they want to work out in a gym, but they have seem to be having a pretty cushy lifestyle. Now, we find out they have laptops as well, and when they rip them apart
destroying
and make deadly devices out of the metal strips or something... because there's a violent attack pretty much every day at Feltham, which is a South London prison. Then they give them replacement laptops.
Brilliant. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
What is going on?
Hard to believe.
And I thought we were being told that our children are being radicalised and no one should have smartphones and everything. What are you giving laptops to prisoners for?
Yeah, you can't have a smartphone in school.
Presumably Wi-Fi and broadband access.
Yeah.
Is anyone checking what they're doing?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. They're now, one of the things that we've been reporting on here for several months now is that apparently now the drug use in prisons is at an all-time high, as is mobile phone use, which is meant to be illegal, because they're having stuff flown in with drones. Drones are just coming into the prison space, dropping stuff, and they're taking it all in and making loads of money.
It's absolutely important. The drugs thing is crazy. It used to be that, you know, someone might, once in a while, you'd hear a story about someone smuggling in a penknife in a birthday cake or something. But now it seems that, the prison guards are pretty much as corrupt as the prison officers. If they're not having sex with the prisoners,
oh, I know.
You know, what are the prison officers doing?
Well, I remember in Scotland when they brought the smoking ban in, right? There was one place left in the country where you could smoke, and that was in prison. And you thought, so you could lock me up for smoking, but I'd be able to smoke when I was locked up. Unbelievable. Other stories to talk about. Massive job cuts looming. £25 billion tax raid. Back to Rachel Reeves, I'm afraid. This is apparently a story in the Telegraph where it says a quarter of businesses are planning redundancies, the highest proportion for 10 years, excluding the height of the pandemic. This is from a survey by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development.
Well, how many of us said, yes, well before the budget, the disastrous budget, this is a huge tax on jobs, it's a tax on employment, it's a tax on employers. And guess what? When you tax smaller employers and even big businesses, Sainsbury's, loads of big companies. What was it? Which bank was it? Was it Lloyds who was saying...
I think it's Lloyds that are shutting down a lot of branches, aren't they?
Loads and loads of branches.
Yeah.
They can't afford it. They can't afford to employ people.
No.
Guess what? Then you have more unemployment people. Then your welfare bill soars again.
No. It's not exactly rocket science that they could work this stuff out, is it? I mean, how difficult can it be? Let's go back to the US, though, for the next one. Page 13 of the Mail. This is a woman who, Ashley St. Clair is her name, who apparently is the mother of Elon Musk's latest child, his 13th child. And the headline is a picture of her with 2 machine guns saying, Musk gave me a lavish New York flat to keep quiet about having his baby, says gun-loving MAGA influencer.
I know.
It's just one of those stories that's got it all, isn't it?
It's really, really funny.
Yeah.
13 children.
Yeah.
His 4-year-old is called X. Which I love.
I saw some other names which are even more weird.
Very weird.
You know? Like somebody Maximus, I think, is another one.
Yeah, he is very, very weird.
Yeah.
Didn't he? I think he married somebody and then got divorced from them and then remarried them and had...
And with his first wife, I think he's got a pair of twins and a pair of triplets. So he's got 5 kids with her. You know, that's unusual. He just is a man who's got a lot of children. And, you know, we talk about Boris Johnson, but Elon Musk, I mean, he leaves him... Totally.
In the dust.
Yeah, she claims she had a private security team and was isolated during her pregnancy before giving birth to a son 5 months ago.
She says, Elon, we want to hear from you.
Yeah. And she basically announced that he was the father of her child on Twitter, didn't she? Which I suppose is appropriate, given that he owns it.
She said she wasn't gonna say anything about it, but actually so many people were asking her that she thought she should come out and, by the way, could I have a couple of £1 billion?
Yeah, amazing.
Oh, dear me.
Absolutely incredible. Back to Donald Trump and Harry and Meghan. I don't like to mention them too often, but apparently, according to The Sun, page 13, they're in a bit of trouble with him because there is now, I think there's a quote from Trump from the weekend saying that if it turns out that Harry did lie to get his visa into America, he might well kick him out. Even though he previously said he wouldn't.
Yeah, well, he said he basically, I can't be bothered with that, you know, it's not very important. And anyway, he's got enough problems with his wife.
Yeah.
And now I think, because of Harry and Meghan's reaction, I think Trump is saying, well, actually, if it is illegal, then, we will take action.
Because they've been giving money...
And so they're retaliating.
Archie have been giving money to all sorts of democratic, you know, fundraising events.
Do you think that's really... I don't think it's really going to bother Donald Trump at all.
I wouldn't have thought so.
They've been I'm amazed that Archie is giving any money to anyone at all.
Have a look at this. This is Tom Hanks, I think, and Saturday Night Live on Saturday, making fun of Donald Trump because the lefties still won't learn. And here we have a look at this.
Oh, well, thank you. Hey, now, speaking of church, can I say something? If more folks went to church, we wouldn't be in this mess we're in now.
You know what? I agree with you, Doug. I'd like to shake your hand, sir. Here we go.
No,
oh, no.
Like that.
Oh, no. It's just a handshake. Yeah, it's just a handshake. Yeah, all right. You're welcome in Black Jam at any time.
All right. Well, thank you, my brother. You know, maybe I'll start a show for you to come on, and we'll call it What Jeopardy?
No. We don't need it. We don't need it.
So this is Saturday Night Live basically trying to make out that all Trump supporters are stupid and racist.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a bit of a smell of Brexit about it, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's Tom Hanks pretending that he doesn't want to shake hands with a black man, when in fact Trump's cabinet and Trump's appointments so far have actually been more diverse than any other president in history.
Of course they have, and that was absolutely pathetic. And
Wasn't
I'm afraid we were
really
watching
pathetic?
In stony-faced silence.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's not
with
funny.
Trump, with your Trump clip...
Even the audience, who would be pretty left-wing at Saturday Night Live, even they were kind of obviously
really not funny. And Tom
uncomfortable.
Hanks doing a kind of basically Forrest Gump impression. Like, what was that? That was the only thing that he's ever really been successful at. No, that was really, really pathetic.
I know.
I'm afraid that, again, it's not going to bother Trump in the slightest.
No, but this is the trouble. In America, still, the Democrats are so busy having a go at Trump and having a go at how awful he is.
Let it go.
I was talking to my sister the other day, and she was telling me the Democrats are still saying, we think the best hope for the next presidential election is Kamala Harris. And you're going, sorry? What? Really?
Literally.
Really?
If that's your best hope.
That's the best you've got?
That's really terrible.
Isn't it? Terrible. Absolutely. Emma, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Have a lovely day. It's only Monday, but already.
It's the beginning of half-term.
It's the beginning of half-term as well. So if you've got the kids at home, tune them in to Morning Glory and get them properly educated, because some of the rubbish they've been taught at school will be absolutely no use to them at all in life, whereas all the things that you learn from this show will be a great big help. Mick says Starmer is going to send our troops to their deaths, unequipped and unprepared, just like Blair did. Well, let's hope not. And Bill in Cheshire says, Starmer's Ukraine plans. How can we police the Ukraine border when we can't police our own streets? We can't protect little girls in Southport, students in Nottingham, young white girls in Rochdale. It's a sick joke. And so it is.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 7, I'm Mike Graham. It is, of course, a Monday, the 17th of February, and it is very, very cold, ladies and gentlemen. It was about 1 degree when I came out of the house this morning. It is going to be warmer at the end of the week, they say. They're promising us a heat wave, 17 degrees on Friday. Really, that would make for an interesting weekend. Coming up, we're going to be telling you more about Keir Starmer. He's off to Paris today to try and be a bridge, he says, between the European nations and, of course, the United States of America, who are operating their own meeting over in Saudi Arabia. The Russians are sending Sergei Lavrov and the Americans are sending Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they're going to start talks about peace in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky's jumping up and down saying there can be no conversation about peace in Ukraine without Ukraine, and the Europeans are saying exactly the same thing. Keir Starmer is going to an emergency crisis meeting in Paris with his mate Emmanuel Macron. I don't know if they're going to be taking out the old Jeep to ride around in, or whether or not they're going to make any inroads whatsoever. You get the sense, don't you, that actually at the end of the day there is no real point to Keir Starmer at all. And if he thinks he's some kind of cross between Theodore Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, I think he's got another think coming. He's written a piece in the Telegraph now saying that he thinks it might be a good idea to send British troops to be peacekeepers in Ukraine after the deal has been done. Well, I don't think there's anybody in the sensible world of Britain who would want him to do that. You wouldn't trust Keir Starmer with a couple of post bags, never mind sending our troops to a foreign land to protect it. Ludicrously, he keeps saying it's very important to protect Ukraine's borders. He can't even protect his own bleeding borders. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always. James from Falls over here. Now, just a quick one on these gas boilers, heat pumps and all this rubbish. It's all right having a heat pump installed. The problem we've got is if everyone had a heat pump and everyone drove electric cars, how are we going to generate enough electricity? Because we've already been close to having blackouts this winter. So, yeah, if everyone did have a heat pump or an electric car, for instance, how the hell are you going to power it? Anyway, keep it up. Thanks.
James, very good point. The bottom line is that heat pumps don't work. Even the people that make them say they'll never be cheaper than gas boilers. And in Parliament, where they were installing heat pumps to try and show that they were leading by example, they've suspended the programme because they don't work. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll also be talking about the NHS. We'll also be talking about more Islamist killers in our midst. One in Austria over the weekend, one in Munich just before the end of last week, of course. And who knows what Lord Hermer would say. He probably wants to represent the killers because that's what he seems to like doing. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Ben has sent me this tweet. My son is not going anywhere near any front lines while this whopper is in charge. He can't even stop the bleeding dinghies. Well, that's right. Here's one from Robert in Hitchin. Says, morning, Mike. Of course Starmer wants to be a bridge for Trump. Someone to walk right over him. Also, funny how Starmer goes abroad whenever there's a frost. Seems like he wants to escape his betrayal of pensioners. Well, there is that. He certainly does like to go abroad. He didn't go abroad last week. He didn't go to the Munich conference in Germany. He also didn't go to the AI conference in Paris. But today, he's going to an emergency crisis meeting about Ukraine in Paris, where he's basically promising to sort out the world. Well, he's not capable of sorting out his own cabinet, is he? Let's talk now to Joanna Bell, political journalist, because quite frankly, I don't think anyone is going to take this trip seriously, are they? Joanna, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. They're certainly not. I mean, when Britain was in the EU, they had the role of being the bridge between America and Europe, but because they were in both camps. But because of Brexit, we lost that role. There is no bridge. Trump is already actively excluding Britain from negotiations. He's even excluding Zelensky. Right. So they're having a meeting over there. They don't really know what they're talking about because they're not privy to any negotiation minutes. So what are they going to be discussing?
Well, exactly. I mean, they're going to be discussing presumably why they're all very disappointed that they're not in the room, because the room to be in is the one in Saudi Arabia where Sergei Lavrov is meeting up with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And that's the only meeting that's worth being in, but they're not in it because Donald Trump doesn't think it's worthwhile, because all that Europe does, at the moment anyway, as far as he's concerned, is be a barrier to peace, because it looks like every single European leader wants the war to continue.
Well, exactly. You know, they say they're up in arms about it. But, you know, at the end of the day, that was the first I've heard of anybody talking about peace in Ukraine. I hadn't heard of Starmer trying to negotiate any peace deals. And now Trump has taken power and, you know, it looks like the war is going to be over, and we should be happy about that. It means the Ukrainians can, you know, leave Britain and Ireland and Europe and go back to their home country and start to rebuild it. That can only be seen as a good thing, right?
Not only that, but we can stop pouring money into what appears to be some kind of fiscal black hole. You know, Starmer was there just a few weeks ago when we were already being told we had no money for anything. We couldn't possibly reverse the inheritance tax on farmers. We couldn't possibly reverse the thing with, you know, the withholding of the heating allowance for the pensioners, even though we've got freezing temperatures in this country. But what we can do is promise £3 billion a year for the next 20 years or something to Ukraine. Well, where's all that coming from?
Well, exactly. And where's it going? I mean, Zelensky admitted, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that he'd lost $100 billion out of $175 billion that America had given in U.S. aid. So, you know, it's basically, you know, where is the money going? We need to know.
Well, I think so. And I think there's no harm in suggesting, at the very least, that Ukraine, with the best will in the world, is not exactly the least corrupt country in the Western world, is it?
Well, I mean, I spent 4 weeks there, and it really is one of the most corrupt places I've ever been to in my life. I don't think, you know, you can really say they've got the biggest human trafficking. It's the epicenter of human trafficking. And, you know, that money seems to have been misappropriated, because if he can't find it, then where's it gone?
Well, exactly.
Trump has asked for a 5% increase in defense spending in the UK, which is on par with what we spent in the Cold War. So 2.5% is not enough for our defense spending.
Right.
So I would suggest that they scrap the Chagos deal and save 18 billion of that money.
Well, at the very least, I mean, some people have estimated it could cost up to 52 billion. Nigel Farage said that. When you kind of look at how much it's going to cost over the course of years, it will actually be a lot more than 18 billion.
Well, exactly. And, you know, it was Lord Hermer who brokered that deal, I hear.
Yes.
The Chagos Islands.
Another place of massive corruption. They were in Chagos. They arrested the guy in Mauritius, who was the guy at the centre of the deal. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you?
Well, no, he was caught with suitcases full of cash, gold watches. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think even with that in mind, that whole deal needs to be scrapped, because you can't trust these people to...
No. I spoke to a friend of mine who's from Mauritius, and he was like, they've got to be insane if they were going to give that kind of money to the Mauritian government. They're that corrupt. None of it will ever see the light of day. It'll just be spent on houses in the south of France and in Zurich, you know?
Well, exactly. And, you know, is Donald Trump going to, you know, sign off on that deal to give Diego Garcia back? I don't think so.
No, exactly. And also the whole point of the Putin Trump conversation is that, you know, Ukraine, while it's very important, obviously, for Ukraine, and some people might say it's very important for Western Europe, and we're going to be talking to Lord Dannett about that later on, who believes very much that we should be upping our defence spending, because right now we have a pretty worthless defence force. You know, this is a much bigger conversation for Trump, because I'm reading in the FT that basically the agreement that has come from this conversation between Trump and Putin is to create a line of communication to solve the problems in US-Russia relations in the interest of removing the unilateral barriers to mutually beneficial trade, economic and investment cooperation inherited from the previous administration. So Trump is all about, whether you like it or not, making money. And I think he's much better at making money than he is at making war. He thinks war is bad for economies. He thinks it's bad for the world. He thinks it's bad for people who get killed. And he's right about all of those things. And I don't quite understand why all of these, you know, little tin pot dictators like Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz in Germany want to keep the war going.
Well, I think they're all riding the gravy train. You've got all these NGOs who are making money from Ukraine.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many people making money from it, and, you know, it needs to end, because Europe is practically bankrupt at this point, and we can't go on anymore.
Right. And what J.D. Vance said to them all about the illegal migrants, I think we should have a look at this clip, actually, because we played it a little bit earlier in the last hour. Let's have a look at it now. This is J.D. Vance addressing the Munich Security Conference about Europe's problems.
It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe, and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants.
And I mean, even as he was speaking, you know, just a couple of days after an Afghan migrant, 24-year-old, I think, drove a car through a crowd of people outside of the Munich Security Conference. And then the following day, Saturday, another attack from a Syrian asylum seeker, this time in Austria, a 23-year-old shouting Allahu Akbar, knifing to death a 14-year-old boy. I mean, you know, these incidents now are becoming so regular that, you know...
Not just that.
It's shocking, isn't it?
The guy was actually smiling after this 14-year-old boy was actually smiling on the street.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody seems to be able to come up with a solution to get rid of these people who hate our country, hate our way of life.
Yeah.
what was Yvette Cooper? She put how many 45 Albanians onto a plane, chartered a plane for £1 million, and gave them all £3,000 as a package to go away, and they're probably back in the country because they've now let how many people since Christmas? 1,800 people.
Yeah, well, more than 25,000 migrants have now reached Britain since Labour came to power, and they're still coming. I think at the weekend, in one day, 240 migrants made the journey on Saturday. So, I mean, you know, if they can deport 45 people in 1 year, that isn't going to even hit the surface of the numbers coming in one day.
Well, they're probably coming back in with the $3,000 that Yvette Cooper gave them.
Yeah, and some new clothes, no doubt, so they might
exactly.
not be recognised.
They'll probably just keep coming in. It's the same people being deported and then coming back in. They're making a big money off it.
Absolutely right. You mentioned the Chagos Islands. Lord Hermer very much still in the news this morning. He's on the front page of the Telegraph because he seems to have a real propensity for representing terrorists, this guy. Apparently he defended an Islamist terrorist who was days away from carrying out a bombing attack on a Manchester shopping centre. He's a Pakistani student who was basically running an Al-Qaeda terror cell in the northeast. He was later found guilty in a US court of plotting to detonate a car bomb outside the Arndale Centre, and he's been sent to prison in America for pretty much life. This guy, Lord Hermer, only seems to represent people who wish to do harm to Britain.
Well, they say he works off a cab system.
Yeah, right.
But he seems to be getting all these terrorists. He got Ranzib Ahmed, who was once described as Osama bin Laden's right-hand man.
Yeah.
And he helped plot 9/11 and the 7/7 London bombings in 2005.
Maybe the cab rank happens to be outside of an Islamic centre or something. Maybe that's why he only picks those kind of people up.
Well, it seems to be, but, you know, it's unbelievable that the chief law officer of the state, you know, has represented Shamima Begum.
Yeah. Jerry Adams.
I mean, you know, you couldn't make it up. It's absolutely crazy, and it's a conflict of interest.
Totally.
And he should, I mean, and it just goes to show that Keir Starmer has terrible judgment when it comes to appointing cabinet ministers and people to...
well, it's another one of his mates, isn't it? Because apparently this guy Hermer was one of his big mates when he was running the CPS, and I think he worked in the same office as him when he was a private human rights lawyer as well, the Matrix Chambers and all that. But, you know, again, terrible judgment from Starmer. Even the cabinet are now up in arms about Hermer, because not only is he seemingly a friend of Islamic terrorists, but he also isn't doing his job very well because he keeps preventing things from happening.
Yeah, well, exactly. And also, he won't declare his financial interest from his legal practice.
Yeah.
So he's adjudicating on legitimate questions are being asked right now, and he won't answer them.
Yeah.
And neither will Keir Starmer. So, you know, there needs to be some kind of showdown here, because this guy seems to be anti-Britain.
Yes, he does. Well, apparently there's going to be a reshuffle coming soon. I don't think he's going to survive it. Rachel Reeves may not survive it either, but we'll keep our eyes on that one. Great to see you, Joanna. Thank you very much indeed. Joanna Bell there giving us her view on what's going on inside of the cabinet. Of course, Keir Starmer off to Paris today for an emergency summit on Ukraine. The real summit on Ukraine, of course, is happening in Saudi Arabia, thousands of miles away. Phil in Coventry says, morning, Mike. Not here, Keir, going to be a bridge, you say? Well, he's already a plank, so he's already halfway there. Let's get a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here. Where do we start after this weekend? Let's start with JD Vance. JD Vance stands up, gives a speech. The vast majority of normal people think, yes, spot on. The German minister stands up and says, this is unacceptable. That's your problem right there. It's not unacceptable. You just don't like it. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be said. Oh, and P.S. Keir Starmer thinks I'm dusting off my boots to go fight some dodgy war in Ukraine. Think again, pal. I'd rather get sent down. Great show, mate.
Sean, very well said. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, we'll be talking to people from the military throughout the show. Of course, Lord Dannett's going to be here as well, who said at the weekend that Keir Starmer is going to be consigned to the dustbin of history for all sorts of reasons, but not least because he refuses to spend enough money on defence. And how much gall do you need to have as the Prime Minister to admit that you haven't got a big enough defence budget and you're not going to increase it, but at the same time, you're going to expect troops from this country to go and be peacekeepers in Ukraine? I don't think so. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk. Coming next, we'll speak to Alicia Kearns, Shadow Parliamentary Under Secretary.
I think the reason that Gen Z individuals feel perhaps not as tied to Britain is because they don't feel a sense of ownership over the country. If you look at a country where previously your parents on the same salary were able to buy a 3-bed semi, and on the same salary now you can't afford to rent a room, you can understand why young people feel perhaps a little bit disenfranchised. Obviously, I would like young people to be patriotic, but when we look around at the economy they've been handed, the society they've been handed, it's no wonder why they don't necessarily feel that Britain works for them anymore.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:22. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. One from Gary in North Ants who says, Mike, if ever there was a man who thought he was more important than he is, then it's Starmer. Europe aren't interested in him, America aren't interested in him, and the UK have had enough of him. I think that's probably a pretty good summation of where we are. But he is, of course, going off to be the bridge, he claims, between the United States of America and Europe at a summit in Paris this morning. Delivering just one piece of information. I'm going to try and drop all these stories in. There's so many of them that happened over the weekend I just want to remind people of. This one from the Telegraph, basically from Sunday. Deliveroo has sacked more than 100 riders as part of a crackdown on illegal immigrants in its workforce. The London-listed food delivery giant has culled 105 workers who illegally shared their rider accounts with undocumented workers. Well, we've been saying this for a long time. Some people were denying that it was going on. Obviously, it's very, very much a thing. Because many people tell me when you order something from one of these delivery companies, it says who the driver is, and when they get there, it's never anybody that looks anything like him or her. Sometimes got a completely different gender. But there we are. Coming up, we're going to talk to Gerald Howarth, former Conservative Defence Minister. Right now, Alicia Kearns is here, Shadow National Security Minister. Alicia, very good morning to you.
Morning, how are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. So a big week this, isn't it, for Britain? You've got Keir Starmer going off to this crisis conference in Paris, says he wants to be a bridge. He's also written a piece in the Telegraph saying it might be time to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine as peacekeepers. What do you make of that?
I think you have to be really cautious before making declarations like that. We are still in a hot war. We've just seen Russia take about 600 square miles over winter from Ukraine. So under what circumstances is he saying this should happen? He's saying peacekeepers. That suggests once a peace deal's in place. But we're not looking for any peace deal here. We're looking for a deal that ensures that we don't see more war in Europe, not just a cessation of immediate fighting. So I think it's quite risky to suddenly announce that you're going to put British troops on the ground without having set out the parameters of what that looks like, and not least when we are so far still from a peace deal.
Well, exactly right. Also, I mean, he's under a lot of fire as well for not doing what he's been asked to do by certainly several leaders of the defence business, like Lord Dannett, to increase the defence spending beyond 2.5%. He's refusing to budge on that. And similarly, from the Trump administration, it would appear, and from the American side of things, you know, Europe, generally speaking, needs to bulk up its own defences.
Without question, and that's where you're completely right to take us from Keir Starmer's comments. Look, we had around 2.3% of GDP being spent on defence over the last few years. We had a plan for how we would get to 2.5% so that we could restock essentially everything we'd given to Ukraine and be ready to fight. If he's saying he's going to deploy the army, well, a lot of our focus has rightly been on the Navy and the RAF, because essentially those who can do missiles and protect us. If we're going to suddenly switch to land army and land focus, there needs to be a lot more investment in it, and there's no sign as yet they're going to deliver 2.5%, let alone beyond that. And as you know, I've always been very hawkish about how much we need to spend on defence, because that is our primary duty as legislators, to keep our country safe. So that should be the focus of the discussion today. The Treasury told Keir that they weren't going to let him spend more than 2%. They haven't started replenishing the stocks. They haven't been pushing forward as the way we should be when there is war on our continent. So they might finally do it now, but look at the wasted months that we've had since July.
Well, quite. And I mean, in terms of what the reaction was to what the Trump-Putin conversation was, it seems to be, on the face of it anyway, like Europe would rather keep paying Vladimir Zelensky to keep fighting Russia rather than trying to find some kind of peaceful settlement, regardless of what that settlement might be. And I realise that, you know, that's also a premature conversation. But, you know, surely better to be talking about peace than actually killing each other.
I think we've always wanted to end this war as soon as possible, this renewed illegal invasion, but it has to be on Ukraine's terms. And history cannot rewrite how this happened and how we got there. I was in Ukraine 10 days before Russia launched its renewed illegal invasion. I'm very clear on exactly what happened. But you are absolutely right. Europe, I have said for a long time, if we were to see war break out in the Indo-Pacific, Europe would be expected to stand on our own 2 feet. We are not in that place as yet, and we've seen too many European leaders shy away. I'm glad that Macron has now essentially recognised the reality of the situation that we're in. We're about to see a new German Chancellor, one that I hope, again, is far more front-footed. But the UK has led so far. Ukraine must be part of the solution. They must be the ones that decide what the terms are for this. But yes, Europe has had that wake-up call, and it's just a shame that it took Trump and Vance going to Munich to make those statements they have, for many of them to wake up and realise they've got to do more.
Yeah, absolutely right. Alicia, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Alicia Kearns, the Shadow National Security Minister. Without saying too much about it, I would say not exactly impressed with the Keir Starmer's so far performance on the home front when it comes to defence. He's written a piece, as I said, in the Telegraph today, in which he bemoans the fact that, we haven't necessarily done enough for Ukraine, but says we must now consider putting boots on the ground from the UK. Well, I don't know anyone that thinks that is a good idea. Roger in Dorset says, morning, Mike. Less than a week after polls told us that the majority of young people would not fight for their country, Starmer has told them that he would put them in harm's way and feed them as fodder to Russian and Chinese cannons. It's not a case of not reading the room. He's not even in it. Have a good day. Well, he's not in the right room, is he? Because he's going to go to Paris to try and be a bridge, he says, to the United States of America from Europe. Meanwhile, the Americans are having a meeting with the Russians in Saudi Arabia. That's surely the meeting to be in if you want to have an influence, isn't it? But he ain't there. Let's talk now, though, to Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust chairman, because the NHS today is in the news. The Labour Party are saying, the government are saying over 2 million extra NHS appointments have been delivered early as trusts have been handed £40 million to go further and faster. It's a slightly tricky one, this, because they have managed to get over 2 million more appointments, but they're comparing it to a period last year when there was a lot of strikes going on. They've admitted that, yes, there were strikes, and yes, by giving 23 billion, the strikes have been ended. They've also got to this figure somehow by working at weekends, which is something I've suggested they do for a long time. Let's see what Roy's got to say. Roy, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good morning.
So, I mean, you could call it a step in the right direction, but I think they're being slightly massaging this one to make it look a little bit better than it is, aren't they?
Yes, you can smell the massage oil as you read this.
Very well put.
Yeah, look, it's good news. The NHS has been working its socks off, but can Labour take the credit for it? Well, certainly ending the strikes was a really huge, big thing that the NHS would need, because the drag of the strikes were creating on waiting lists and everything was just horrendous. I mean, they settled it at what price? So, I mean, there's a whole different argument about whether or not it was settled in the way that it should have. It's a 2-year deal. I've always said it needs to be a 3-year deal. My guess is I think the junior doctors are going to come back for afters, but we'll see. So, but anyway, it was fixed. So that means we're not really comparing like with like, apples with apples. It's more apples with light bulbs, because the performance went down the pan during the strikes. So it is a good thing. It's also complicated because if you look at waiting lists, 7.5 million people on the waiting list. There's only 6.3 million. There's just people waiting for more than one treatment, and they're called patient pathways, which is what we count when we look at waiting lists. Also, over half of them will be waiting for a diagnostic. Now, the diagnostics, with the acceleration in the diagnostics, really came when the Tories invested in the community hubs, the community diagnostic hubs. That was Steve Barclay, actually, that did that. Right. And I mean, they take a long time to set up, but we're reaping the benefits of them now. And of the 60% of people who need some kind of diagnostic, only 20% will need some period of inpatient care. The rest might need nothing or outpatient care. So it's too early to say we've cut the waiting list. The numbers are very fogged.
Well, indeed. I mean, they talk a lot as well about, as you say, those diagnostic centres and people working at weekends, which again is something that you and I have talked about for a long time. You know, that there's still an awful lot of hospitals where there's a very, very low number of staff around at the weekends. They haven't changed everything, but if they've changed a bit of it, then good luck to them. But equally, you know, we all know that from the past several weeks we've been hearing that A&Es are still in crisis. People are waiting, you know, tens of hours sometimes to be seen, sometimes 4 or 5 hours is not exceptional at all. Ambulances are still not unloading patients. People are still in hospitals not being moved out when they could be because they've got nowhere to go. You know, so those big sort of what I would call macro problems are still all there.
Yes, they are. And if you look at the numbers, although the flu numbers are slightly down, the COVID numbers are very sticky still, flatlining, and the norovirus numbers are 80% worse than they were this time last year. So there's still like a winter crisis. We've had, it's not really a winter crisis, it's just
winter, isn't it?
It's just what happens in the winter. You're right, Mike. And so we're still struggling through that. I mean, we actually have had this acceleration in winter illnesses from the autumn, and now we're almost on the doorstep of spring, really, aren't we? So
didn't feel like it this morning.
Right through. The problem is that there's not enough capacity in the NHS.
Right.
Once you fill the beds up with medical patients who've got these seasonal problems, mainly frail elderly, but you can't get them home safely, then you start overspilling from your medical beds into your surgical beds because you've got nowhere else to put people when the corridors and the cupboards are full and the wards are full. You've got to use the surgical wards. When you do that, you have to start cancelling waiting list appointments, and that's the trouble that the NHS is facing now. So I think this is a good sign. The trajectory is good, but I think it's too early yet to claim a victory.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is, and we have this conversation every year, Roy, and we have had it for several years, is when is somebody in the NHS going to actually make a plan so that this doesn't happen every year, so that we don't have the same winter crisis, that we don't have the same overcrowding? Why don't somebody come up with a better plan, build some more hospitals, do something?
Exactly. The reason is we don't have enough capacity. So the NHS has to plan what they call their surge capacity over the winter months. And I saw the winter plan for this year in June, and it was a perfectly sensible plan. We've now got about 15,000 people, I think, being looked after in virtual wards. That's people not coming in, being looked after at home. So it's doing everything it can with the capacity it's got. But at the end of the day, we do get these seasonal fluctuations, and you see it in other parts of the world as well. Where this year's winter plan, which, as I say, I saw in June, didn't take into account the thought that we're going to have, you know, the norovirus, the COVID, and the flu and the RSV all at once. I mean, it's very difficult to project that. We projected the flu accurately, but the other, I think it's taken everyone by surprise, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. Good to talk to you, Roy. Thanks very much indeed. Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust chairman, who agrees with me that these figures that you're going to hear from Wes Streeting throughout the course of the day have been seriously and heavily massaged. As he says, you can smell the massage oil from here as far as that propaganda is concerned. Of course, you won't hear Wes Streeting talking to us about it because Labour don't talk to us. Apparently. I can't remember the last time we had a Labour government minister on here. They must be frightened. I don't know why. Keep up the good work, says Dan in Cardiff. My eco-nutter neighbour had a heat pump installed. They put a huge unit the size of a fridge on the floor outside of his house on the driveway, making the driveway useless. 3 weeks to install, and has had an engineer come out to see the unit almost every week. I see my boiler bloke once a year for 25 minutes for a safety check. Brilliant. Absolutely right. And Steve in Huddersfield, on the subject of half-term, because it is half-term, so if you've got the kids at home, there's all manner of things you can have them doing. One of them is listening to this show or watching it. As Steve says in Huddersfield, don't worry, my 14-year-old son hears your breakfast show on a daily basis, and I make sure to educate him on what a ridiculous country we're living in. We were both laughing the other day when he told me a girl in his school identifies as a wolf. I despair of this once great country. I know. Well, we had the old, health minister, didn't we? The new one, Ashley, whatever her name is, coming in saying that it's OK to identify as a llama. You might have remembered seeing the picture of me with a llama's hat on, a llama's head even. Unbelievable stuff. Coming up, we're going to speak to Sir Gerald Howarth, and we'll see what he thinks about Keir Starmer's Ukraine plan. Wants to send British troops there, heaven forbid. And also, what is he doing about the Chagos Islands? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 7:38. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, and we are here all the way through until 10 o'clock. Darren says this: I think when Starmer enters the Oval Office to meet Trump, Trump should get up to approach Starmer, and as Starmer reaches out to shake hands, Trump should spin him round, give him the mother of all wedgies, and then send him on his way. That's one way of dealing with it, I suppose. Margaret in Birmingham says, why are we giving £3 million a year to Ukraine? 3 billion it is, not 3 million. It's the 100-year contract they signed. Look after your own country and the people here. You muppet. Well, quite right. 3 billion a year is what we apparently have committed to giving them for the foreseeable future. Now, I'm not one of those who wants to see Russia going around invading sovereign nations. I'm not. However, I also don't want to see us handing money hand over fist every single year to Ukraine to fight a war which doesn't appear at the moment to have any end in sight, unless there's an end in sight which is actually negotiated, which is what's happening in Saudi Arabia today. Let's talk to Sir Gerald Howarth, former Conservative Defence Minister, see what he makes of it. Sir Gerald, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. A big, important week, this, isn't it, for Britain, for Europe, for Ukraine as well. Keir Starmer's off to Paris today for some kind of crisis meeting with European leaders about what to do about Ukraine. He's written a piece in the Telegraph today saying it may be a good idea to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine as peacekeepers. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's far too early to talk about putting any troops on the ground in Ukraine to hold some sort of line against the invader Putin. I think much more fundamentally, we need to recognize that this is a very serious moment for the security of Europe. The United States is looking like it's stepping back from NATO in its commitment to help support peace in Europe, and that is very serious indeed. I think it represents extraordinary naivety on the part of President Trump, and the rest of his team. And I'd like to remind your readers that I think it's your viewers that I think it is pretty discourteous of the President of the United States to try to negotiate a peace in Ukraine when his country signed an agreement alongside the United Kingdom and Russia in 1995, under which they agreed to respect the sovereignty, independence, and then existing borders of Ukraine. And for the United States to be negotiating unilaterally is a discourtesy to the United Kingdom, because we were part of that agreement signed by Sir John Major at the time, signed by Bill Clinton on behalf of the United States. And I think just to exclude Ukraine and ourselves is very discourteous indeed. And we do not know what negotiations or discussions that President Trump has had with President Putin, but it certainly has a smack of appeasement about it. And the consequences for the United States and the rest of Europe will be very serious. You cannot trust a word that Putin or his sidekick, his foreign minister Lavrov, say. They said they had no intention of invading Crimea. They did. And Putin has made it perfectly clear in a speech in July 2021, he regards Ukraine as part of Russia, and he intends that that is what will happen.
But presumably the alternative to not having peace talks with Putin would be to let the war continue, wouldn't it?
Well, I've said all the way along that unless we drive the aggressor out of Ukraine, we can expect further trouble. Do not imagine that if Putin is able to negotiate with a naive American administration some kind of deal under which 20% of Ukraine is handed to Russia, notwithstanding that agreement that was signed in 1995, that Putin will stop there. One of his generals made clear 2 years ago that the intention was, having taken Mariupol on the Caspian Sea, then to work on the Sea of Azov, to work west through Odessa, link up with Transnistria, where there are pro-Moscow sympathizers, possibly take Moldova, and leave a landlocked rump of Ukraine. This is very serious indeed. And there's a gap between the enclave, the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic coast, and Belarus, called the Suwalki Gap, which straddles the border between Poland and Lithuania. Perhaps Mr. Putin would say, well, there are oppressed Russians living there. We need to drive a Russian corridor through there. This is very, very serious stuff indeed. And I'm afraid that, as I said at the outset, this all really does smack of appeasement, as Sir Ben Wallace, former excellent Defence Secretary of the United Kingdom, said recently.
Well, back in 2014, what would you call that, when Russia decided to invade Ukraine then and nobody did anything or said anything?
Oh, he did nothing. Complete impunity. And I'm afraid that our own Foreign Secretary at the time, William Hague, was not at all robust. I put it to him in the House of Commons at the time, before the invasion took place, and I said, I asked him what assurances he'd have from this same Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, who's been there for about 20 years. What assurances had he had from Lavrov that Russia did not intend to use military means in Crimea? Answer came there, none. Right. We allowed Putin to act with impunity. And look what has happened.
Right.
He has now taken a huge slug of Ukraine, so if we allow him to keep that slug of Ukraine, do not imagine that he will stop there. We have all the evidence that he will not stop there. It's not as though I am suggesting things that are fanciful. See how he has behaved in the past.
Yeah, but in the past...
And the real threat for the British people.
Well, yeah, but in the past, Gerald... But in the past, Gerald, we have also been guilty of not responding. So, you know, it's all very well now saying the war must continue. We must continue to give money that we don't have to what would appear to be a stalemate. You know, I don't know whether you would wish to go to war with Russia and try to push them back out of Ukraine. I don't think many British people would want that. I don't think we want to see British troops on the ground. I don't think we want to see the British military getting involved at all. I think you'd find it very hard to discover that anyone in this country wants that. Europe seems to want to continue funding it, but to no end, apparently. I mean, because it's clear that the best thing surely to do is to stop the killing, have some kind of conversation, and then take it from there, no?
Well, I think Ukraine needs to have a say in that. Zelensky and his people, who are the ones who have really suffered.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. But then, you know, there's plenty of time for all of that, isn't there? The sense I get from the Trump conversations with Putin is that the war is only a part of it. You know, Trump believes, I don't agree with you that he's a naive president. I think Joe Biden was a naive president. I think Trump knows exactly what he's doing. And I think he doesn't want there to be war in the world as long as it costs money. And I think at the end of the day, he's got the same pressure from the US voting public as we have, people don't want to spend money on this anymore.
Well, there's certainly no doubt that the United States has shouldered a far too great a share of the burden of NATO. That is unquestionable, and we have been warned on this side of the Atlantic. We have been warned repeatedly, not least by David Cameron in 2014, that European members of NATO need to step up to the plate. But look, have you forgotten what happened in the 1930s, Mike?
Not at all.
I'm afraid
I mean, I wasn't around then, but no, I haven't forgotten. But I think the point is that, you know, this is a very different situation than what happened in the 1930s, isn't it?
No, it's not. It is not a different situation. It is part of a sovereign state has been annexed by a tyrant who has made it perfectly clear that he intends to rebuild the Soviet Union. And what would, if we allow this to happen, what would happen then if Putin decided that he wanted to take Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania?
Well, that's what the negotiations are about. Surely you have a conversation and when you set up a framework by which none of that is allowed to happen. And if it does happen, then there are probably serious consequences. I mean, some suggested that I've heard have said things like if he was to continue with any kind of action whatsoever outside of Russia's current boundaries, then NATO would immediately invite Ukraine to become a member. You know, there are things that can be done and said, surely.
Well, we don't know what President Putin has President Trump has discussed with the tyrant Putin, and we need to know. He needs to share this with his allies. America, he claims, has given the largest amount to Ukraine.
Well, they have.
Terms of
That's true.
finance.
In terms of weapons, yeah.
As an individual nation, yes, but not in totality. In totality, it is the European countries who've given more than the United States.
They have, but most of that is non-military, though, isn't it?
No, it's not non-military. We've been giving military equipment to Ukraine, and so have other countries across Europe. This is, forgive me, Mike, I seldom disagree with you, but I disagree with you.
Listen, you're allowed to disagree with me. I welcome it. And the point is we're pledging to give Ukraine £3 billion a year for the rest of time, while at the same time we've got a country which apparently is bankrupt, which we keep being told has no money whatsoever, and people in this country who vote for the government, who want the government to keep them safe in their own country, who are failing to do so, quite frankly, because people are getting stabbed to death every day on the streets of this country, and have other priorities. And I know that you're speaking as somebody with a great knowledge of what's happened before and with great knowledge of defence and all of that. But what I'm saying is that, you know, the people of this country are ready to see this all come to an end. And quite frankly, you know, whatever that end is, well, you might go out and talk to some people on the street because they do.
I'm afraid there are other people in this country who recognise that this has the hallmarks of the 1930s, and that if we do not stand firm now, we will pay a massively heavy price in the future. So you can forget any more money.
So your solution is to fight back against Russia, is it?
My view is that unless the tyrant is ejected from Ukraine,
but he's not being ejected by Ukraine, is he? Who's going to eject him?
We have to give more support, and I'm afraid the Republicans spent months and months refusing to support President Biden. And I have not much time for President Biden, but they spent months holding up a military aid package to Ukraine. And I asked a former national security advisor of the United States who'd worked alongside President Trump, and I asked him I said, why are our Republican friends not supporting the Biden package? And he said, Gerald, because they are ignorant.
No, it's not, because they knew the American people didn't want it, and that's why Trump got re-elected. Simple.
Because the American people, only 14% of them have passports. They don't understand.
Well, you're going to slag off the whole of America now. Come on.
I beg your pardon?
I'm not slagging off the whole of America.
I'm not slagging off the whole of America, but I'm making the point that America, many American people, they have their own problems in America, and they don't like their country undertaking these foreign excursions, whether it's in Iraq, Afghanistan, or in Ukraine. But we have to look at the big picture, and the politicians in America have to look at the big picture. And the big picture is very clear, that you have a tyrant in Moscow determined to annex large parts of other people's territory. And if you do not stand firm. Do not draw a line.
So maybe it's better to put a lead on him,
Mike.
right? Maybe it's better to put a lead on him then, so that he can't get out where he can do harm.
I beg pardon?
I said maybe it's better to put a lead on him then, so that he can't get out and do more harm.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, is put a lead on him and stop
right.
him taking any.
Yeah,
he's trying to take more land in Ukraine.
Well, for 3 years, though, Gerald, we'll have to stop in a second. For 3 years, we've been continuing to funnel money to Ukraine, and so far it hasn't worked. It's as simple as that.
Well,
so now I think it's time to try something else, isn't it?
I've said on your programme repeatedly that throughout this we have been too little, too late. It was Boris Johnson who first stood up for the West and got President Biden on side to support Ukraine. Our European partners dragged their feet at every single stage.
Well, why not have a go at them?
Yeah, because I'm having a go at them. And can I just, one final point, and that is in respect to what's happening in Paris today. Don't forget that President Macron is a man who tried to negotiate with Putin right at the outset.
Yeah.
President Macron and the other Euro fanatics on the other side of the channel want to create a European army. And Zelensky was completely barking mad to call for a European army. That is the last thing we want. We have a European army, and it's called NATO. And it is absolutely imperative that the European countries now step up to the plate and support, not they ditch the idea of some sort of EU army, and they step up to the plate and
start paying into NATO.
In NATO.
Absolutely. So, Gerald, listen, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. I quite enjoyed disagreeing with you, by the way, so don't worry about that. So, Gerald Howarth, former Conservative Defence Minister, with a slightly different view to me. You can tell me whether you agree with him or me. I've got a pretty good reason to think that it will be me. 0344 499 1000. We'll come back with a voice note from James after this.
Nearly 1 in 10 patients referred to the NHS does not have functional English language skills, according to new data. Of the electronic referral letters sent to patients by NHS England last year, more than 9% had to be translated into a foreign language. Chris Philp, who we mentioned earlier, he said this is an English-speaking country. It is up to people to come here to learn the language, not expect UK taxpayers to spend their hard-earned money on translations. If you come to this country, you have a duty and a moral obligation to learn English.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, 7:56, almost coming up to 8 o'clock. The sun is up. I think the sun is looking quite strong today as well, so good luck warming up if you can. It's half-term, of course, as well, so a lot of people at home with the kids listening to this show, hopefully. Let's talk now to Beth Prescott, Education Lead at the Centre for Social Justice, because apparently schools have got falling attendance levels, and the head of Ofsted says it's partially because parents are working from home, and so the kids think they should go to school from home as well, which is fairly logical, I suppose. Beth, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, we knew that there was a problem, didn't we, as soon as the schools shut during COVID, that kids would not be used to going to school every day and would suddenly think it wasn't as important as they should think it was. So I'm not that surprised about these revelations, really.
There's no doubt that there is currently a crisis in school attendance. We have 1 in 5 children persistently absent, that is missing 10% or more of their school time, the equivalent to an afternoon a week.
Yeah.
We have 157,000 children who are severely absent, missing 50% or more of their school time, more than half their school time. And this is something that we at the CSJ have done some extensive research into. We've uncovered a multitude of reasons as to why there are these high absence levels, including anxiety, unmet special educational needs, poverty and unsuitable housing. But we've also uncovered that the pandemic appears to have broken down that social contract between home and school, with nearly 3 in 10 parents agreeing that the pandemic showed that daily school attendance is not essential.
Right, and that's part of the problem, isn't it? Because if you get told you don't have to go to school for an entire year, in fact, in some cases it was even longer than that, you're going to think, well, it's not that important at all then, isn't it?
I think what's going to be really critical to turning the tide on the school attendance crisis is rebuilding that partnership between home and school. And that is why we at the Centre for Social Justice are calling for a national parental participation strategy to rebuild that trust, rebuild that engagement between home and school, so that home and school work together in partnership around the child.
But I guess if you're a parent and you're working from home and you say to your kid, you've got to go to school, he or she will turn around and go, well, you're not going to work, why should I?
And I think that's why it's important that parents and schools are both playing their part. Parents, daily school attendance is important. We know that even just 1 day missed can have an impact on a child's GCSEs. We know that school absence is associated with being not in education, employment and training in later life, and even with ending up in the criminal justice system. Therefore, it's so important that parents and schools work together to get that child into school, to get them the education that can open doors for them.
Right. But how do you do that, though?
So we at the Centre for Social Justice are calling for the nationwide rollout of 2,000 attendance mentors, and these will work with home, with school and with other multi-statutory agencies to understand what are the reasons behind why a child might not be attending school and to remove those barriers, some of which we know can be complex barriers such as mental health or unmet special educational needs or poverty. But we're also calling for that national parental participation strategy to rebuild that communication and that trust between home and school and to help parents again see daily school attendance as essential.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's Beth Prescott, Education Lead at the Centre for Social Justice. Brad in Chiswick says, Mike, what a great idea. Let's not get anything installed in our own houses or buy any electric cars until Parliament and every last politician that advocates for this stuff has it installed into their life and their workplace first. Can we start the Parliament First policy? Someone get a petition going. Well, it's a good point, isn't it? This is based on the fact that Parliament has stopped and suspended its installation of heat pumps because basically they're too noisy and they don't work. Brilliant. This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. no ball in, or a far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be speaking to Harry Cole, political editor at The Sun. His column in there today, talking about Starmer having to go to the pawn shop, that's the pawn, P-A-W-N, pawn shop, if he wants to try and help out with the war in Ukraine, or if he wants to in some way up sticks and join the Europeans and say, we need to have a say. We need to have a bigger army. We need to have a bigger military presence in Ukraine. One of the things he's written in the Telegraph today is that not only does he want the British to continue to pay a load of more money to Vladimir Zelensky, but he also thinks British troops should be on the ground as peacekeepers if a peace deal is done. We just spoke to Gerald Howarth, a former Defence Minister, back in the last hour. He disagreed with me that the people of this country want this to be over and that the people of this country do not wish to have it subsidised any longer by taxpayers' money. He thinks Donald Trump is wrong and naive. I disagree. I think Trump is doing all of the things that he said he would do. He said he would end the war in Ukraine. Today in Saudi Arabia, there's going to be a meeting going on between the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and, of course, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for the United States of America. The big problem for Europe is that they haven't been invited, and they're throwing a right old hissy fit ever since J.D. Vance told them a few home truths. They're not very keen on the idea that now America is dealing directly with Vladimir Putin, and they're kind of closed out of the conversation. Well, Keir Starmer wants to be a bridge between the two, the United States and the United Europe. But is he? Can he be? Not really. I don't think he knows a thing about defence. I don't think he knows a thing about anything to do with national security. He can't even keep the streets of his own country safe. He can't even protect his own borders, for God's sake. Why on earth would anybody take him seriously talking military matters in Paris today, which is what he's going to be doing? Coming up, Mark Littlewood's going to be here as well, Director of Popular Conservatism. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. I've just heard Starmer is willing to put UK troops into the Ukraine-Russia war. I find that quite chilling, actually, Mike. So he's willing to fund the Ukraine war, but he can't give enough money to the pensioners for their winter fuel allowance, and also the farmers, other things, etc., etc. British people should be looked after first, Mike. That's his job.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting, man, Mike.
James, you're absolutely right. His job is to protect our borders. His job is to protect our citizens. His job is to fight for Britain, not to fight for Ukraine. Like many of these prime ministers, he thinks he's more important than he actually is. Well, let me tell you some home truths, Sir Keith Starlin. You're not very important, and on the world stage, you're an ever-diminishing figure. So stop promising to give our money away to people when you don't know what they're doing with it, quite frankly. Also, we're talking heat pumps down in Westminster in Parliament. They're not installing them anymore. They've given up. Why? Because they don't work and they're too noisy. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know, I don't know what does. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's 5 minutes past 8. Let's get it on. More turmoil in the government as well, because Lord Hermer, or Lord Harmer as I like to call him, it turns out has had yet another dodgy Islamist client who's currently serving a life term in America for plotting to blow up the Arndale Centre in Manchester. Lord Harmer actually represented this guy and got him off the charges that MI5 had brought against him. Absolutely extraordinary. The knives are out for him now, though, because as Attorney General, he's not actually doing his job very well. But let's talk to Mark Littlewood. First up, Director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Great to be with you.
Yeah, good to see you. This is a big week, as I keep saying today, for Britain, and a big week for Europe, I suppose. Keir Starmer's going over to this summit, crisis summit, in Paris, which does feel rather to me like the sort of, the spoiled kids who are not happy about being rowed out of the big party, having a little party of their own. You know, the big conversation is going on in Saudi Arabia this morning between Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov. And quite frankly, I think the British public, by and large, as I was saying, I don't know if you heard me talking to Gerald Howarth, have had enough of this, continual funding of a war that appears to be going nowhere.
Yes, I've got a lot of sympathy with the British public's view, especially as one of your viewers was just pointing out, we're making cuts that are directly hurting the British people.
Yeah.
Look, Mike, it's pretty unsurprising that, the European leaders are a bit of a sideshow here. We have decided not to properly fund defence, basically, each European country. The UK's been a little better than others, but not perfect. So why should the Americans listen to us? Effectively, NATO has become a welfare state for European security. We've just been living off dollar subsidies. So I think the Americans have got every right to say, well, we're the one paying for all of this security, or the large bulk of it. We're going to be the ones to negotiate it. And as for Keir Starmer saying that he's going to act as a bridge, well, I'm not saying it would be a bridge to nowhere, because what the White House gets up to is vital, but it would be a bridge from nowhere. I can't see anybody in this US administration saying that the solutions to the problems they face now is a bigger role for Keir Starmer. That seems to me utterly fanciful. But I would say this, okay, it does appear that the war has to some degree in Ukraine ground to a bit of a stalemate. But it is in our interest to ensure that if a peace deal can be struck, that it is stuck to. It would be a disaster if in 6 months, 12 months, 2 or 3 years' time, Putin decides he's going to have another go and breach whatever red line would be agreed in any putative peace deal. So we've got a bit of a stake in that. What I find completely curious is that Keir Starmer seems to already be talking about the precise number of troops that we might deploy. 25,000, I think, was mentioned. Well, you don't really know what deployment you might need, how many troops you might need, until you know the nature and the contours of any peace deal. And it's much more likely that it'll be equipment that will be uswell rather than British boots on the ground, which potentially inflames.
Well, also, if he knew anything about history, Mark, he would look back at the Bosnian conflict and what happened in the Balkans, where I spent a fair bit of time. And the peacekeeping was done then by the UN. There were British troops there, but they were under the sort of blue-helmeted, guise of being there as representatives of the United Nations. Bizarrely enough, Ukrainian troops were also there, and they were sort of policing parts of Sarajevo. But the one thing the Ukrainian troops were most famous for was running prostitutes and drugs. So, that tells you a lot about what we're dealing with here. The bottom line for me is that why should Britain be supplying troops? We haven't got as many troops in this country as we've got illegal migrants. I mean, that's the situation. We are not a military power. We might as well stop pretending that we are, and Starmer should stop playing soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, you understate the position, Mike. I mean, the number of illegal migrants in Britain dwarfs the size of our military, which we've allowed to be hollowed out over a long period of time. Look, the truth is we've allowed the UK to position on the world stage, even on the European stage, to wither. Defence spending has been deprioritised. If actually called upon to defend ourselves rather than playing some role in the Russian-Ukraine conflict, it's difficult to imagine what we might be able to muster now. What sort of serious fighting force could we put together? I think it's highly, highly questionable. So we're going to have to spend some more on the military, and that's going to have to mean some cuts in other areas of government spending. I'm a great believer that the first and principal duty of government is to protect the realm, and that means defence spending should always be at the higher end of the list of spending priorities rather than completely disregarded. But we have to accept that having not done that, we're not really part and parcel of this process. And I just think it's extremely odd that Keir Starmer, as I say, is throwing around these very specific numbers before any peace deal's been reached. Any peace deal that is reached, it doesn't look like we're going to be much of a part of. At the very least, wait for that before you make any specific commitments.
Well, exactly right. I mean, Gerald Howarth described Donald Trump's administration as naive. I think they're very far from naive, but I think Starmer certainly is naive because in the midst of all of this wanting to support Ukraine stuff, he doesn't want to boost our military. He said it. He said he'll go up to 2.5%, but no higher. Well, you know, that's not going to make any sense, is it? No, that is ludicrous, and I think we've got to realise now that if we want NATO to continue as a serious organisation, and as I was just saying, it is a serious organisation, but one that the American taxpayer has been colossally subsidising, then 2.5% of GDP is most likely the floor, not the ceiling of what we need to spend. We need to get to that number super quick to prove that we're serious, and I think you can trust that the Trump administration will be insisting that their NATO allies get to that number pretty fast. But it would not be ludicrous to imagine that future demands might be as high as 5% of GDP. Probably can't get there overnight, but the trajectory, I would have thought, needs to go far beyond 2.5%. And I rather agree with you, Mike, that this isn't, and disagree with Gerald Howarth. I don't think this is naivety from the Trump administration. Even if everybody's wishful thinking was that they would have liked Ukraine to prevail totally in the war and every Russian to be expelled from Ukrainian land and even Crimea to be taken back, doesn't look like that's realpolitik. The wishful thinking would be to hope that could happen. So it seems to me some sort of deal needs to be struck. And what will be front of mind for the Americans is how do you try and make sure that Putin sticks to that deal? And I'm not totally convinced that 25,000 British troops milling around in Ukraine is the best way of doing that. No. It might be, but to have put those numbers on the table right now seems to me cart well before horse. Yes, no, absolutely right. Well, let's have a look at what Donald Trump thinks of Keir Starmer, because he was asked at the weekend what they might have to discuss when they meet up.
I just signed a letter to him. He asked for a meeting, and I agreed to the meeting. We're going to have a friendly meeting. Very good. We have a lot of good things going on. But he asked to come and see me, and I just accepted his asking.
Do you have a date for that, sir? And what do you hope to
Very soon. I think he wants to come next week or the week after.
And what do you hope to discuss?
I don't know. It was his request, not mine. But, you know, I met him twice already. We get along very well. He's a very nice guy.
He's got a brilliant way of sort of being dismissive about someone without apparently doing it offensively.
Absolutely classic Trump passive-aggressive behaviour there, right? Oh, he's sort of written me a letter. I think I've got a slot in my diary. God only knows what he wants to talk to me about, but, you know, I'll try and find a few minutes for him. Yeah, I mean, that underscores, I think, that you know, although he ticks the right boxes of saying we've got a friendly relationship. Mind you, he says that about the leader of North Korea as well. But it underscores how fragile the special relationship really is now, Mike. I think the relationship between the British government and the US government is, you know, somewhat frosty. Yeah. A lot frothier than we would like. So just, you know, superb from Trump again. Yeah, I've signed this letter. God only knows what he wants to talk to me about, but you know, I'll try and squeeze him in between some of my more important meetings. Yeah, exactly. Very well delivered line. Yes, absolutely right. Let's talk about the state of the cabinet. There's a lot of talk at the weekend about reshuffles. Rachel Reeves now, even by those who have been sort of saying, oh, she won't go anywhere because, in fact, that would look as though it was Starmer's appointment that went wrong. I mean, even John Rentoul in The Independent is now conceding that actually Reeves might not survive. She's under pressure now because I think it's a backbench Tory MP has written to Lloyds Bank asking for the report that was done on her expenses scandal, which she's continually trying to run away from. Lord Hermer's back in the news again. Turns out he's defended yet another Islamist terror suspect who's ended up being put in jail for life in America. You know, he's likely not to make the reshuffle cut either. I mein, it's just going from bad to worse for this lot, isn't it? Yeah, it's been, I mean, look, it's been a catastrophic start to this Labour government, only been in office for, what is it, 6 or 7 months now. I think it's 8 now. Feels like a lot longer. It feels like a whole bloody lifetime, actually. It does. and he's already lost a few cabinet ministers. Look, with regard to the Attorney General, I would have thought Starmer will realise he's got to shuffle him out.
Yeah.
It's just become too embarrassing. Look, if you are a lawyer, you tend to the fact that you take up various cases doesn't necessarily mean that you're sympathetic to the client on that case, but the list of cases fills in, doesn't it, one's sort of preconception of the Attorney General that he's not necessarily attuned with British interests. He seems to be attuned with interests of everybody apart from Britain's national interest, and that's pretty disastrous if you're the Attorney General. So I would have thought if Starmer's got any political nous, he'll have to shuffle out his friend there. Reeves, however, is a really difficult one for him. If you lose your Chancellor or choose to remove them, oftentimes it means the Prime Minister's on borrowed time.
Yes.
That is the key relationship. If he wants to get rid of the Attorney General, or I think Lisa Nandy's been another suggested potential casualty of a reshuffle, he can do that. But were he to drop Reeves, then I think he's got a real headache on his hands. But maybe if this keeps getting worse for Rachel Reeves, she falls on her own sword. I mean, there are now a string of questions that she seems completely incapable of answering.
Totally. I mean, if this accounts paper gets released, I don't know what the legalities are around something like that, confidentiality, etc. But you know, an MP of the country has asked for it. So if it is provided, and it does show that she was at the very least, you know, putting in dodgy expense claims, charging things to the company that she shouldn't have been charging. Also, I mean, the fact that we've discovered since last weekend that she was actually followed by somebody from the banking organisation to see what she was up to, because she kept spending so much time doing Labour Party jobs. Now, I don't know about you, I've had some interesting jobs in my time. I don't think I've ever been followed around by my employer to see what no good I'm getting up to. I don't think that's. I think if that's happening to you, you are in a pretty bad place.
Yeah, that's right. And look, maybe she's got an explanation for this, but her explanations to date about her past career activities have been somewhat wanting, haven't they, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, the claim that she was working for the Bank of England for 10 years turns out to be 5.5. I'm to just, you know, accidentally apparently mislay 4.5 years of your professional life. That takes some doing, no explanation given. So Reeves is hoping that this will go away, but I always think when politicians get into a hole like this, they've got two possible strategies. One is to cross their fingers and then pray that the story moves on, that it becomes boring, you try and write it out. Usually the best story is that you put everything on the table immediately. You do some long sit-down interview. I'm sure you'd be happy to have her on your show, Mike, for an hour or so to go through this.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can't even get Wes Streeting. I mean, I can't even get Wes Streeting on to boast about the 2 million extra appointments that have apparently been achieved by the NHS this year when they weren't on strike. Well, that's surprising, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I would have thought if I was advising Rachel Reeves, which would be an unlikely position for me to find myself in, but if I were to be, I think I would advise that her best chances of survival now are to put everything on the table, explain everything, admit whatever wrongdoings there were, or mishaps or misunderstandings, but get it all out there. That's probably her best chance of survival, but I'd probably put her chances at measurably less than 50-50 over the medium term.
Very much so, very much so. Great to see you back, Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Thanks for talking to us this morning.
Thanks,
coming up, we'll speak to Harry Cole, political editor at The Sun. Tracy from Bromley says, morning, Mike. So Parliament can't work with the noise from heat pumps, but they expect us to sleep whilst our water is heating for our morning shower. Tony says General Sir Richard Barron said the British Army couldn't sustain a division for more than a month and would run out of weapons and munitions in a few days. Yeah, well, peacekeeping is all very well, but they might have to go with the old Ursula von der Leyen plan of using wooden guns. She was actually Defence Secretary in Germany when they had so little money for defence that that's what people had to do. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. This is, of course, Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Coming next, we're going to go and talk to Harry Cole.
just remember, we talk about the United Kingdom. It was us who stood by Ukraine when it was invaded. We provided weapons. In fact, before the invasion even started, those weapons were crucial in helping the Ukrainians to hold back the initial Russian assault. Everyone thought they'd be rolled over in days. If they had been, Europe would be in an even worse position than we are now. In something like position in 1938, 1939. So, it is important to put that in perspective.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
23 minutes past 8, I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips in all week for Julie Hartley-Brewer. It's half term, of course. If you've got your kids at home, let them listen and watch this show and let them understand what the world is actually really like. Paul says Starmer's like the most unpopular kid at school that never gets invited to the party, so he tries to gate crash it. He's out of his depth in the UK, never mind the world stage. He's off to Paris today to try and somehow become a bridge, that's what he says, his words, not mine, to the United States from Europe. He thinks that that's going to make a big difference when it comes to discussing Ukraine, Europe and Russia. Let's talk to Harry Cole, political editor at The Sun, who's got a column in the paper, of course, today, every Monday. Page 10, Keir will have to go to the prawn broker, for his defence cash, because he has done what can only be described as a brilliant job this morning. Page 1, pages 8 and 9 as well, about an incredible amount of wastage that this government has spent. £15 billion spent on ludicrous and what can only be described as questionable enterprises around the world. You're our sort of very own Doge, Harry, you are this morning. You're the sort of Elon Musk of The Sun, aren't you? What's going on?
Morning. I don't know if I'll take that, Mike. I'll think about that. I'll work out whether that's a compliment. But
it is. No, it's very much a compliment.
This is just the tip of the iceberg, though. That's this is one day's coverage of delving into quite some of the more bonkers stuff we're spending our money on. And what makes it relevant at the moment is this debate around defence spending. Obviously, Donald Trump's cracked the whip. J.D. Vance last week at the Munich Security Conference, firing an absolute rocket straight into the European establishment, saying, look, Uncle Sam's paid your tab for too long. You've spent all your money on welfare and healthcare and increasing the size of your state on everything but defence, while the US taxpayers picked up the tab. Yeah. Actually, Rachel Reeves says, "Oh, there's no money. What are you going to cut? What are you going to cut?" Well, here we go. Here's some examples of some absolutely, wacko stuff. Prawn studies in Bangladesh, poetry lessons in Colombian jails. Yeah. Got gender conferences in Kenya. Some sort of weird deal with a Porsche dealer in Albania to provide minibuses to Albanian prisons. Yeah. I mean, your listeners will be banging on their heads on against their copy of The Sun as they read it this morning.
It's unbelievable stuff. I mean, one of my favourites, accountability and inclusion in the Congo, 9.5 million. I mean, who signs this stuff off? I mean, according to the piece, I think it's the Foreign Office, that one. Is this all Foreign Office money? I mean, it's obviously taxpayers' money.
It's ODA money, but actually, to the credit, the last government did actually abolish DFID and wrap it back into the Foreign Office to try and sort of get a grip on some of this stuff to make it actually, is the aid money we're spending directly accountable to British foreign policy? You'll have people on and they'll say, look, this is soft power, this helps us, it gives us a good reputation around the world, it stops it stops problems coming down the line, maybe, but we're not seeing a huge amount of evidence of it. So look, it's tricky because we've got a legally enshrined commitment to spend 0.7% of our money on aid. Yeah. And arguably you could say that, look, why is the Ukraine money not going towards that? Right. Some of the asylum costs are coming out of that budget, but clearly not enough. And the Labour set up this great thing called the Office of Budget the Office of Value for the Taxpayers' Money, or a new go basically,
right.
When they came in power 8 months ago. Within weeks, it was declared a complete red herring, a complete waste of money with no clear plan. And only in Britain, because we create a watchdog for overseeing public spending that ended up costing the public purse too much money.
I know. It's incredible to think of, isn't it? And I mean, as far as, Keir Starmer's sort of slight delusions of grandeur here, I mean, he's off to Paris making out that he's going to be the guy that puts it all together, puts the deal together, manages to get Europe talking to Trump. I mean, the big meeting today is in Saudi Arabia, isn't it, between Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov, where they're going to actually face-to-face America and Russia, try and fix something or start at least a process to stop the war. So, my worry slightly is that a lot of these European leaders don't actually want the war to stop. I was talking to Gerald Howarth a bit earlier, former defence minister, who said, we must continue to fund, this is the only way to beat Putin. I mean, I don't know anyone in this country as an ordinary voter who wants that to happen.
We've come a long way from, Putin must fail, Putin must be defeated, to, everyone's exhausted of this war and it must stop. And, it's the American public that you've got to look at as well. Look at the positions, not just Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's Congress, it's a whole swathe of elected politicians across the political divide in America that are finally calling time on this. They had to really battle to get that last significant payment for Ukraine through the House of Representatives. Yeah. And, I don't think the political appetite is there to do it again. That said, we are a lot closer to the front line of this war than America are. And, some of our friends in Europe, especially the Baltics and our friends in Poland, are extremely close to this. So, the idea that if we abandon Ukraine, Putin's just going to say thank you very much and leave it there, I think is, that's what's worrying people. So something, this is not what's frustrating about this last week is this is not out of the blue. Trump has been saying this for months, for years almost. His victory was, at least a 50% chance of it happening up against Kamala Harris. I know lots of people convinced themselves it wasn't going to happen, but, they should have been preparing for this a lot longer. And obviously we've got the little man, Macron, trying to, eke out any last chance of influence that he has. He's absolutely been destroyed at home domestically. He's very weak, but the way the French constitution works means actually he can despite being in complete doldrums domestically, he is very powerful when it comes to French foreign policy. So he's playing catch up. The Germans are scrabbling around having their election, so they're off the pitch. Starmer actually, weirdly, is probably one of the more stable prime ministers in Europe. So there is a role for him. Britain has always tried to play a bridge. Everyone from think about how Tony Blair did it with Bush, between Europe and Bush. Obviously, that had mixed results.
Well, that ended up with us going to war. I mean,
look, we are at war. That's the thing, Mike. This is a war. We are funding it. We talk about British troops on the ground. We are pretty involved already. We are funding it. We are pressing. We aren't necessarily pressing the buttons, but we're certainly providing the buttons, the missiles, the planes, the tanks, the expertise, the civil servants, the procurement. We are in this war. So the idea that we can just walk away, without consequences and very quickly is a nonsense. So, in a weird way, what can Starmer do other than try to ride two horses? I think he's probably trying to, ease up on, loosen the Europeans up a bit for his Brexit renegotiation, saying, look, scratch my back here. I'm helping you out. I'm going to be we're going to help you sort this out with Trump. Now you need to help us sort a few things out in our backyard. Whether it will work remains to be seen, but it's a big gamble for Starmer, but it's not really one that he has a huge amount of options.
No, true. Speaking of his stability and his sort of, backyard, what about all the talk at the weekend of reshuffles coming up? There was lots of talk about my Lord Hermer not making it through the next reshuffle, and maybe even Rachel Reeves looking a bit dodgy after all of the business last week on the expenses claims.
I think Reeves is probably in a stronger position than you'd think, given the fact that Starmer has backed to the hill. He's almost basically downloaded entire economic policy and to her. So her economic project is his economic project in a way, just because he doesn't have his own sort of, isn't flexing his own muscles in that way. He's outsourced the entire thing to her. So if she goes, he's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I think Herman is an interesting one. Obviously, they were mates before, they worked together before, but he is becoming definitely a distraction. And actually, each day we learn an even more crazy thing about Herman,
Right.
another sort of wrong, and he's defended or tried to bust out of jail or tried to stop going to jail in the first place. And people say about Keir Starmer he's ruthless. He can be ruthless, yes, but it takes him a while to get there. If you think about people like Sue Gray, it took months and months and months of negative stories and problems before he finally just snapped. So I do wonder whether, Hermer is probably on borrowed time. But again, if he sacks Hermer, it goes back to his judgment, because he was the guy that brought Hermer out of security. He brought him into, he was a jobbing human rights lawyer, the darling of the North London dinner party set, and he was the one that made him a politician. And his guy is clearly unsuited to being a politician, because he seems to be fighting the international courts battles in government rather than fighting the government's battles on the world stage. So if he goes, it does say, well, why did Starmer hire him in the first place?
Yeah.
But in terms of reshuffle, I suspect somewhere between the local elections in May, which, Reform look like they're going to be doing well, Labour, getting a bit worried about those, and then there's the summer break, sort of end of July. So sometime in between then, I think we will see a reshuffle. I don't think it's going to be a massive cabinet reshuffle at this rate, but I do think the junior ministerial ranks will have a lot of chops and changes. There are a lot of very ambitious, younger, very bright Labour MPs, the argument goes, that need to be sort of brought into the junior ranks so they could be at sort of cabinet level by the time of the next election in a few years' time. And also, if you look back at how the government was selected in July last year, because Labour only had 200 MPs, before the election, they could only really make most of the ministers out of those ones that have been in Parliament for a little while. And actually, that intake had some real duffers in it. The 2017 Labour intake, the 2019 Labour intake, a lot of Corbynista throwback types, some really not really people that are in jobs that are not really up to the jobs. So I suspect we'll see them cleared out at a junior ministerial level, and some, rising stars, bushy-eyed, bright-eyed, younger types brought in.
Heaven help us. We'll look forward to that. Good to see you, Harry. Thanks very much indeed. Harry Cole there, police editor of The Sun. Also got the front page this morning. Prawn crackers is the headline. As Putin's threat grows, Chancellor dithers over extra pounds for defence, yet we blow billions on crazy projects like shrimp farms in Bangladesh. I mean, it is quite remarkable and quite ludicrous. As I say, he's done his own Doge investigation there with some of the stuff that's come out. £500,000 of Women's Affairs directors' money for the military of Jordan. £500,000, as you said, on a fleet of electric Porsches for Albanian jails. Transforming feminist funding in Iraq. £5 million. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. We've got some pounds to talk to you about, though. Have a look at this. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a news broadcasting network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
8:35. How about this on the subject of heat pumps, because we're going to be talking about those in a moment. Here's one here. I used to install heat pumps, says Andy, in Wales, but I found I was removing more than I was actually installing, as people were so disappointed with them. I would love to have a debate with Ed Millipede on this. I also design electrical EV hubs and have worked in renewables for years, and we will never reach net zero. Ed Millipede does not know what he's talking about. Andy, I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. Well, anyone who knows anything about energy knows that heat pumps are a bad idea and simply do not work. Down at Parliament, they've decided to stop even the attempt to install them because they don't work and they make too much noise as well. Harry Wilkinson is going to join us from the Global Warming Policy Foundation. He's head of policy there. We'll find out what's going on.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock when Alex Phillips was here in for Julie Hartley-Brewer. It's half term, so I hope you've got the kids up and doing something exciting. If you're out and about, you can still listen to this show, of course. You can watch it on a variety of methods as well. Richard Dannett is coming up very shortly. Lord Richard Dannett, that is, a military man that used to run the armed forces in this country. He's got plenty to say about what it is that we need to do over the course of the next few years and maybe even the course of the next few months. First, though, let's talk to Harry Wilkinson, Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation. A couple of stories to come to you with, Harry. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
It comes as no surprise to you, basically, that one of the suppliers of heat pumps, one of the manufacturers of them, has come out and said, basically, they will never be cheaper than gas boilers. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how many subsidies you throw in. They'll always be much, much more expensive. And they also will not work as well as gas boilers, which are sort of the ultimate way to heat your home and the ultimate way to heat your water. So what's the future now? Now it turns out that Parliament down in Westminster, they've also suspended their imposition and installing of these things because they don't work, basically.
Well, it's good to have this realism there. You know, it is almost always going to be more expensive to have a heat pump because the installation costs are so much more. It's not just like replacing a gas boiler. You've got to potentially replace your radiators as well, have underfloor heating, because it's all about drawing that air from outside and spreading that air around the house. So it's a significant piece of engineering. And of course, electricity per unit of energy is 4 or even more than 4 times as expensive as gas. So that just makes the fundamental economics of trying to get heat pumps to be cheaper than gas boilers incredibly difficult. You know, I don't want to see people banned from getting heat pumps, but it should be a voluntary choice if that's what someone wants to do. What the government is doing, it's mandating heat pumps, but we're so off track. You know, there's only been about 70 or so thousand heat pump installations in the last year. It's supposed to be 600,000 by 2028. In just a few years' time. So we're way, way, way off track where the government has this target to get to. And I mean, look at that Parliament story. You know, that's a classic example, a really difficult space to heat. And of course, heat pumps are not up to the task. And people familiar with the Parliament's building will know it's been incredibly cold in Portcullis House the last few years where they've installed those heat pumps. So they're just not working as effectively as they would have maybe liked to have worked. And so, you know, people really need clear warnings when they're getting heat pumps.
Well, they just don't work, do they? I mean, the point is that I was told last week as well, an awful lot of councils up and down the country are installing these things in council homes and in social housing and giving them to people with benefits for free, and they don't work either.
And that's really worrying because, you know, people in council homes have less freedom over their lives in terms of their housing situation. So councils have this kind of authoritarian power that they can just wield. And staying warm is actually one of those fundamental things to people's well-being. So, you know, where they're installing heat pumps and they're not working well, and that's against people's wills with no consultation whatsoever, you know, it just shows how powerful the net zero agenda has become. So far as councils are concerned, meeting net zero has become more important than meeting the needs of their actual residents. You know, when the last local elections came out, I remember receiving leaflet after leaflet from different parties, and they were all talking about how they wanted to achieve net zero, but not about the basic services. You know, I live in Southwark. You know, none of the leaflets were talking about basic services. They were talking about how they would solve the climate emergency. This is so divorced from people's daily lives. And the political class just need to wake up to the fact that, you know, people's cost of energy is absolutely vital, and they should be focusing on getting the cost of energy down not these pie-in-the-sky ideas about a climate emergency and relentless net zero targets.
Exactly right. Couldn't agree with you more. Harry Wilkinson, great to talk to you, Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Thanks very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to talk some more about Ukraine. We'll talk some more about Keir Starmer and his trip to Paris. We're going to speak with Lord Dannett, who's a former Chief of the General Staff, a man basically who used to run the armed forces in this country. We'll talk to him next.
Disgusting. It's
what?
horrible.
No, it's not. No, it's
horrible.
not.
It's horrible. In the Mariana Trench, which
hippie.
is something like 30 miles down undersea, they're finding plastic bags and plastic in there. We've got plastic particles in our brains and everything else because of all the plastic in the environment.
Don't give a I don't, nor do I. Nor do I.
It's really, really awful.
Sick of the environment. It can go to hell.
No, it can't. There's only one environment, and we need to look
I just said
after
I'm
it.
sick of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:47. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. The sun is up. Very, very bright and sunny out there, by the way. It certainly is in London. I know it may not be there where you are. Pretty cold, though. They say it's going to get hotter by the time the weekend comes around. Ralph says this: I can see Starmer increasing the defence budget from 2.5% to 2.5% from 2.3%, which in real terms is minuscule. 3% should easily be achievable if he stops the cloud shrimp plan that he and Reeves live in. 3% will be a message to all EU leaders to pull their fingers out and spend more. Fund NATO properly. Well, let's talk now to Lord Richard Dannett, former Chief of the General Staff in the British Army. He's got a piece of the Telegraph today. There is no time left to waste, it says. The UK must spend more on defence. Lord Richard, very good morning to you.
Mike, good morning.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. When you say more, how much more do you think we should be looking at spending?
Well, there's a very strong case that, as people are saying, 2.5% really doesn't touch the sides. Yeah. We should be moving to 3 or 3.5%. And just a few days ago, Donald Trump talked about 5%. Now, people may think he just plucked that figure out of the air. But if you go back to the mid-late 1980s and the last decade of the Cold War, that's what we were spending on our defence. And at that level of expenditure, it gave us a nuclear and conventional deterrent capability that prevented the Cold War ever going hot. So even talk of 5% is not out of the way. But on the way to that, 3.5% is where we should be planning for now. And Rachel Reeves should be under clear instructions that she's got to find the headroom to do that, even if it means raising taxes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem, as J.D. Vance pointed out, for a lot of countries in Europe is that they've neglected defence spending. They've spent money on other things, haven't they? Particularly the welfare budget in this case, in our country. They spent an awful lot of money. We know 15 billion from The Sun this morning is going to some rather obscure enterprises around the world. You know, everybody knows the government. It's a bit like the NHS. They've got enough money. It's just a question of reallocating it properly, isn't it?
Well, I mean, of course, that is the principal duty of government, is to choose and to make priorities. There's another figure that's quite astronomical. We're spending something like £64 billion a year on health-related issues of people who can't work. Yeah. That is planned, that is programmed or expected to possibly rise to 100 billion by the end of the decade. Well, if we could bear down on those sort of benefits where they're not really required, that gives you the headroom to increase defence.
Right.
For example, I mean, if and go back to what I said a moment or two ago, nobody wants to raise taxes, but if there are so many demands on the public purse that they can't be afforded within the current tax envelope, well, then shock horror, we may all have to shoulder the burden somewhat and pay increased taxes, penny or two on income tax. No one wants to do it, but it may be the solution.
Yeah. I mean, the trouble is people are sick to death of paying more taxes than they've ever paid in their lives. I mean, tax burden now higher than it's ever been since the Second World War. We got the Tories to thank for that in large part because they put taxes up as well. It's not really, I'm not having a go party politically here, but the bottom line for me is that we've now got a much bigger government. I mean, you and I are probably roughly the same age, you know, much bigger government than we used to have, far more people working in Whitehall than there used to be, you know, more advisors in Downing Street, more people in councils, you know, ludicrous numbers of quangos set up, run by, you know, people who simply don't do very much but are somehow in receipt of public funding. And I think, you know, people are fed up with it. And is it not time? I mean, we've seen what's happened with Elon Musk, you know, sort of slicing and dicing the American cake in terms of what we've discovered is being spent on things. I don't think we even know the half of it.
Well, I think you probably could be right, and I'm sure that there are economies that can be made elsewhere. But I think, as important as that is, put that to one side for a moment and just come back and focus on the defence need. It is quite clear, with a brutal war that's been going on for 3 years in Ukraine, and with an American president who quite reasonably is saying that Europe should bear more of the burden, and we shouldn't rely on the United States for European security, then it's self-evident that we've got to spend more money on our own defence. And of course, this morning in the Telegraph, the Prime Minister is saying he is ready and willing to commit British troops to a peacekeeping mission. Well, he may be ready and willing, but actually the army is not ready. And there would be quite a large bill if we were going to do that.
Right.
I was Commander of British Forces when we ended the Bosnian War in the mid-90s, and Commander of British Forces when we went into Kosovo in '99. Even for a peacekeeping, a peace implementation operation, we need a large force that's well trained and particularly well equipped. And we've been running down our expenditure on military equipment for years. The underinvestment in the army in particular is horrendous.
Yeah. And so if we were to increase spending, where would that spending best be spent, if you like?
Well, we've got to increase spending right across the board as far as the military is concerned, both in the air and the maritime areas. But the crucial issue at the present moment is to increase our land force capabilities. And we need to make the existing forces more lethal, but we also need to spend more on new technologies. I mean, we've all seen over the course of the last 2 or 3 years in Ukraine how drones and drones linked to shooters are critical on the battlefield. Well, that is quite correct, and that is quite true, and that will require major investment for us very quickly. But it doesn't mean that conventional methods of war fighting, the main battle tanks, self-propelled artillery, and so on, are no longer required.
Well, that's
it's an unfortunate fact that when you bring new weapons, it doesn't mean that old weapons are redundant. You just have to widen the capability and the number of clubs in your golf bag.
Yes. Now, I remember talking to some military experts a few years ago who said, you know, the future of the battlefield is going to change significantly. It's all going to be very much more cyber, and it's all going to be much more robotic. And that Ukraine has proved that that is absolutely not the case, as you've just illustrated. You know, down and dirty, sort of almost hand-to-hand fighting, house-to-house clearing is still the way they do it.
Exactly so. But there is also a high-tech dimension as well. And that is the difficult thing for Secretaries of State for Defence and Chancellors to get their heads around, that just because you're going high-tech, just because you're trying to go at arm's length, doesn't mean to say getting down deep, dirty and personal is going to be replaced. You know, you asked about, you're showing some pictures of a transport aircraft currently on the screen.
Yeah.
Well, we've cut the number of transport aircraft we've got, the number of tactical aircraft we've got. We've cut the number of helicopters that we've got. If we are even contemplating putting a peacekeeping force into Ukraine, all those things need to be provided for at greater levels. So Keir Starmer has just got to get real.
Yeah.
Yes, the military will do whatever he wants us to do, but he's got to pay for it and start paying for it now. 2.5% doesn't touch the sides. Going to 3 and 3.5% is the right direction of travel now, and sign up to it now so that defence programmers can plan a sensible way for the future.
And as you say, the army will always do what they're asked to do, because that's the kind of people that they are. But what do you make of what is going on at the moment? I mean, he's going over for a peace or a crisis summit with Emmanuel Macron and other European leaders. They feel as if they're being left out of the conversations that are being had currently in Saudi Arabia between America and Russia. What do you make of Trump's plan?
Well, I don't think Trump has got a plan yet. He's got a hope. He's got a wish. He thinks that if he can get into a dialogue with Putin, that he can do a deal with him. But there's an absolute irony here. On the one hand, Trump is saying to us Europeans, we've got to take a greater share of responsibility for our own security.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, he's now negotiating a deal that directly affects the security of Europe over the heads of the Ukrainians and potentially over the heads of European leaders. So European leaders and Zelensky have got to be brought into this negotiation right now, right at the start.
Is this not just a kind of a show of force, though, by Trump? You know, and they will come into it at some point.
Yes, I mean, Trump is, as we know, I mean, he's the art showman, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he likes to make these outrageous statements, and then his officials have to worry about how to implement them. No, this is showboating as far as he's concerned, but it shows a state of mind of his. But critically, absolutely critically, Europe and particularly the Ukrainians must be involved in any form of negotiation over the Ukrainian war. It would be outrageous not to do that.
Right. But what do you think? I mean, there are some people, like I was talking to Gerald Howarth earlier, former defence minister, who seems to be more keen on fighting Putin and beating Putin and doing that forever until he's beaten. Whereas I think an awful lot of certainly British people and a lot of American public as well just want to see an end to the war.
Well, we'd all like to see an end to the war, but particularly we'd like to make sure that another war doesn't break out. And the way to ensure that is to make sure that our military capability is at such a level that we deter further aggression. I mean, there are a lot of very worried countries in Europe at the present moment. You have to ask why in their history have Sweden and Finland decided that this is the moment for them to join NATO. It's because they're worried. I was at the Baltic Military Conference last year and met a lot of very worried Lithuanians, Latvians and Estonians. They've been under Russian domination before. They don't want to go back there again. And the way to prevent that is to make sure that the West's military capability is strong enough to deter further aggression from Vladimir Putin. And don't forget, if there is a ceasefire in Ukraine, he will use the time to refurbish, refit and prepare his troops to go again somewhere else.
But do you think it's possible to kind of shackle him, if you like, in terms of with a strong military on one side of the border and a series of I don't know, agreements in place? I mean, somebody has suggested to me, for example, if he was to move on any other country, that Ukraine and maybe that other country as well would suddenly join NATO if they weren't already in it. So that might be a deterrent for him.
Well, all the other countries that border Russia at the present moment are NATO members. So an attack on any one of those that any one of those countries would trigger Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and we would all be drawn into that war. Now,
I don't think he wants that, though, does he?
He doesn't want that, but what he would like to do is to sow disharmony and break the unity of the West, and then he can try and knock people off piecemeal. So the unity of the West is really important. NATO staying very closely together is really important. But behind the words and behind the treaty alliance, or the alliance treaty, there's got to be a meaningful and sensible level of deterrent military capability. And currently, at the levels of spending that we are achieving at the present moment, we're not producing that military capability to deter future aggression from him. That's the big issue, and that's what our government's got to get its head round, and other European countries as well.
Absolutely right. Lord Richard Dannatt, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, former Chief of the General Staff and the British Army. Now, of course, you're going to listen to what Lord Richard Dannatt has to say, and you're going to listen to it and understand it and assume that he is speaking the truth, because what he's saying is 3% is definitely nowhere near enough. So 2.5% probably absolutely not near enough. More money needs to be spent, and he's not against the conversation that Donald Trump is currently having with Vladimir Putin, as long as he involves Ukraine at some stage, presumably sooner rather than later. We'll take your views on that, of course. 0344 499 1000. I know a lot of you have called. We will try and get to all of you in the next hour, because we've got still plenty of time to do it all in. Isabel Oakeshot's coming up. We've got more news for you on the heat pump front as well. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips was here. She's in all week for Julie Hartley-Brewer. It's half term. If you've got the kids up and about, make sure they're listening to this show where they can be properly educated, unlike some of the rubbish they get taught at school. I've got this from Mark in Selby. Mike, I would rather our foreign aid budget was spent to the people smuggling gangs for them not to bring illegal immigrants to our shores. Surely that is spending to save in the long run. And as for Starmer trying to be a bridge between the EU and the US, it's a remake of Bridge over the River Wye. Very good. I see what you did there. The man is a complete idiot. Well, we just heard from Lord Dannett there, who just said, you know, the bottom line here is that we need to increase our defence spending. He says if taxes have to go up, then so be it. I don't agree. I don't think taxes have to go up. You can see from what's in the Sun this morning, £15 billion of aid lunacy going on, taxpayers' money being spent on some ridiculous things, including basically millions and millions of pounds going to the Congo, £9.5 million going to the Congo for accountability and inclusion, £5 million going to Iraq for transforming feminist funding. I mean, that's just two of the examples uncovered by Harry Cole and The Sun. We'll talk to Isabel Oakeshott this morning about the whole situation with Ukraine, the whole situation with Keir Starmer wanting to apparently be a bridge, and also the whole of Europe basically being completely and utterly stymied and sort of caught like rabbits in the headlights and getting all upset because J.D. Vance had actually told them a few home truths last week at the Munich Security Conference. Let's get a voice note from Dave in Coventry.
Morning, Mike. Dave from Coventry. Great show as usual. Keir Starmer on about sending troops over to Ukraine. What's our army and what's our navy doing? Why don't we put them on the beach here and in the channel to protect our invasion? I don't get it. I really don't get it. It can't be that difficult, surely. Great show.
Well, I mean, you would wonder why any government would allow the Army, the Navy and, of course, the Air Force to be deluded in such a way as the last government did, as this government seems to be doing. Starmer's saying he's going to go up to 2.5%, but no more. And that, according to Lord Dannett, is not going to be enough. But really, do we need to spend any more money in Ukraine? I don't think we do that either. 0344 499 1000. Let's spend the money on our own army, let's spend the money on our own borders, let's spend the money on our own streets and keeping them safe before we start giving more money away to a foreign nation. Quite simple, isn't it? This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And we're also talking heat pumps on the show this morning as well, because down in Parliament they've apparently abandoned all hope of trying to put heat pumps in because they're too noisy and they don't work. And we've also got one of the main manufacturers of heat pumps actually admitting today that basically they will never be cheaper than gas boilers. Carol in London says, regarding heat pumps, I can see history repeating itself. I worked for London Electricity and the council installed storage heaters in their high-rise flats, and in the end they removed them because they didn't work and were too expensive to run. How are the tenants going to be able to pay to run these heat pumps? Well, it's a very good question, Carol. The point is they don't want them, but they're getting them anyway. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. Should we start with Ukraine?
Yes, let's do it. I mean, there seems to be an awful lot of gnashing of teeth going on over in Europe. You know, there's another mini crisis summit going on where Keir Starmer's going to go over there, and I think he's trying to sort of cosplay himself as a cross between, you know, Winston Churchill and Theodore Roosevelt. He's neither, I'm afraid. More likely to be Churchill the dog.
Oh dear. This strikes me as a classic case of something this Labour government is very good at, which is making headline-grabbing announcements which have precisely zero follow-through or underpinning. Clearly, this is not a coordinated announcement with the armed forces, because all we're getting now is reaction from the usual retired generals saying it's all impossible. And, you know, politically, as many of our viewers are already pointing out and callers, how is this government going to spin this to the British people when they see their own invasion going on every single day? People coming over the channel, and apparently our armed forces can't be used for that. Kind of go figure. Yeah. I mean, the reality is that we don't have thousands and thousands of troops to send to Ukraine. The army has been massively diminished in recent years. The headline numbers bear very little relation to how many personnel that are actually battle ready. You know, it is a tiny fraction of the overall roughly 70,000 army personnel that we have. You might find we've only got about 5,000 that at any given point could go anywhere. And we certainly wouldn't be sending all of them. So you end up really talking about probably a few hundred. I mean, we had, I think, about 800 in Estonia a few years ago before the Ukraine invasion. And you know, within the armed forces, they were laughing at themselves about how tokenistic this was.
Yeah.
And one point I'd like to make is we've got no business, and Starmer has no business, organising some kind of joint European defence operation. The UK is not part of any European defence alliance, and nor should it be. We are part of NATO, and that is the main defensive alliance that we should be supporting.
Right.
And the operation should be done through that.
Well, exactly right. And I mean, when I was back in the old days of the Balkans conflict, which I covered a fair amount in Bosnia, you know, all the peacekeeping forces that were there under the guise of the United Nations and under the guise of the Blue Helmets, right? Which I don't think the UN would even be involved in now. I don't even know what the UN does anymore, to be honest. I've got no idea what they're for. But I mean, unless it's a peacekeeping force which is run either by NATO or by the UN, Starmer's got no business whatsoever committing our troops to somewhere where they could run up against Russian troops or North Korean troops or God knows what.
None at all. I mean, let's be very frank about what he's trying to do here. You know, an embattled prime minister who's plummeting in the polls and is in really quite serious political trouble is trying to now recast himself as some kind of global statesman.
Right.
Far too late. You know, at the point where we all know that he's a muppet, he's trying to pretend that he's something other than a muppet and get some kind of gravitas attached to anything that he says. And the other thing he's doing is trying to reposition himself and the UK as big players in Europe. And whilst we never not wanted to have good relationship with our European allies, we don't want to be part of European structures. What we want to do is be able to forge our own future. So I feel like he's acting, as he so often does, kind of ultra vires here. You know, he's just sort of gone off on one, hasn't he? Just as he did with the Chagos, by the way. You know, we'll just blithely sign the UK taxpayer up to a few £billion to lose something that's important to them. You know, you're hardly going to convince the voter as Prime Minister that you're a great strategic global peace player if you're busy giving away strategic assets like the Chagos. So none of this is consistent, is it? It's all about Starmer trying to get through another day, trying to shore up his authority, and I don't think it'll work. I think throughout the course of today, we'll see an awful lot more senior figures, retired generals, retired Navy, retired admirals, saying, hang on a minute, this just doesn't withstand scrutiny, and I'm not sure we're really up for it.
No, exactly right. Well, just in case you were worried about whether he's not in the mind's eye of Donald Trump, have a look at this little clip from the White House this weekend. The President was asked about the upcoming visit from the British Prime Minister.
I just signed a letter to him. He asked for a meeting, and I agreed to the meeting. We're going to have a friendly meeting. Very good. We have a lot of good things going on. But he asked to come and see me, and I just accepted his asking.
Do you have a date for that, sir? And what do you hope to
Very soon. I think he wants to come next week or the week after.
And what do you hope to discuss?
I don't know. It was his request, not mine. But, you know, I've met him twice already. We get along very well. He's a very nice guy.
I mean, talk about damning somebody with faint praise. Yeah, what are you going to talk about? I don't know. No idea.
Oh dear, he asked to see me. He asked, it's kind of like, you know, as if it's sort of like, you know, your pet's coming in for about half an hour of being patted on the head at the very best. He's just sort of tolerating it, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's going along with it to be polite. It's a bit embarrassing, really, isn't it?
It is. Well, this is what we've come to, though. You know, we've got an Attorney General who is supposedly the chief lawman of the government, who appears to prefer to represent Islamic fundamentalist bombers than ordinary members of the British public. He prefers to represent Gerry Adams rather than actually any of the people who some of Gerry Adams' friends killed. He prefers to sell off the Chagos Islands than to make sure that the streets of Britain are safe from horrible migrants coming here and killing people. You know, what the hell is going on?
Well, what people are left with in the UK is a feeling that Britain isn't being put first. This country is not being put first, and it demonstrably isn't.
No.
You know, that's a fantastic spread in the Sun today, just highlighting some of the completely lunatic projects that we're supporting. And it is just the tip of the iceberg on the waste of money in this government. So, you know, spare people a thought when they're asked to tolerate, yet again, the suggestion that they should pay more tax to do the fundamentals, because having decently resourced armed forces is a fundamental. But people should not feel that they have to pay more, be told that they have to pay more taxes for that, because they don't need to pay more taxes if the tax they already paid was spent properly. It's not okay to allocate millions of pounds to ridiculous projects on the other side of the planet.
It really isn't. As J.G. Vance pointed out, the problem for most of the European nations that were at that security conference in Munich is that they have neglected defence. They have spent more money on making their governments bigger. The state has enlarged incredibly. I mean, look at the European Union, you know, which didn't exist, you know, back in even the 1970s. It wasn't anything like it is now. You know, when we signed up to it, you know, with Ted Heath asking the question, you know, do you want to join, you know, this European organisation, which appears to be, you know, a European common market. Suddenly we've now got millions of people employed by it, buildings all over the place, you know, lawyers coming out of your ears, and, you know, we've got more benefit seekers now, I think. I think our benefits bill in this country is higher than our defence budget. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
It is absolutely insane. And I just don't know how we go on like this. You know, the extent to which the entire country, the way it's run, seems to have been skewed around people who want to take advantage of the benefit system and of our generosity. Someone messaged me this morning, something that I just can't get out of my head. They were on a hospital ward in St Thomas's Hospital in London. It's one of the flagship hospitals in London. And they said 4 out of 6 people on this ward were dying, and 4 out of 6 of the people on the ward could not speak any English. And there was an old lady there who was dying alone, unable to communicate to the medical staff. It was being done through Google Translate, and her relatives were nowhere to be found.
Wow.
Ask yourself the question, how have we got into this position where the NHS and our entire system is looking after people who cannot communicate a word of English? This is so important. You know, it is symbolic of the whole way we're approaching our own country. It's time for people to do their bit. You know, you can't expect healthcare if you can't speak the language and won't even bring someone with you to help you.
Right, exactly right. And of course, you know, we've got Wes Streeting out and about today trying to sort of pimp up this idea that they've managed to solve the waiting list problem by getting 2 million appointments more than we did last year this time. Well, it's very simple. They've opened up some weekend operations for the diagnostic centres of the country, and this time last year they were all on strike. You know, so it's a sort of, you know, it's yet another sort of paper mask which dissolves as soon as you put any water anywhere near it. You know, the NHS is once again in crisis. They keep telling us loads more people have got flu, loads more people have got norovirus. You know, the A&E hospital waiting rooms are absolutely full to the brim. You know, there's nothing that's being fixed here. And I had a sort of, and I said this earlier when I was talking on the show this morning, I had a kind of slightly seminal moment driving around in Sussex yesterday, took the dog to the beach. On the way home, came past this horrific sort of, you know, housing estate being built somewhere near Bexhill. You know, hundreds and hundreds of houses, no idea where the cars are going to go, no idea where the kids are going to go to school. And there was a sign that said they were considerate constructors. And I thought, this is what Britain has become. You put a sign up to say you're a considerate constructor, despite the fact that there's lorries pumping out all sorts of noxious fumes all over the place. There's, you know, roads being smashed to pieces by the size of the equipment that's being hauled in and out. They're not considerate in any way, shape or form. But they call themselves considerate, and then that's okay. It's a bit like, you know, you go to get your petrol now at a petrol station, and you get a sign that says, why not take a bike? You know, why not take a day off from driving? You're a bloody oil company. Why are you telling me to, you know, be green? And similarly on the railways, you know, you get a sign that tells you to be kind and not to, you know, be horrible to anyone when they can't run the trains on time.
Oh, don't get me started, Mike, about the railways. I'm going to give you 1 second of this, which is I was sitting on yet another delayed train at King's Cross Station on Friday. We'd all been waiting a while. And then the announcement came that they had managed to find a driver, because that had been a problem. You know, we were in King's Cross, St Pancras, you know, it's kind of one of the hubs of the world, you'd have thought. But said driver was just, quote, taking a break. I was like, well, hundreds of passengers sit in the station waiting. Your man or woman is taking a break. Why? Because of the grip of the unions. That's why. The culture that is destroying our country, and your considerate constructors is a kind of microcosm for the whole of this government, isn't it?
It is.
You know, they put a badge up saying that they're being very considerate and kind, whilst all the while driving an absolute bulldozer through our country, our culture, everything that has been so proudly built. And I don't want to be too negative. We can save the day, but my God, how much damage are they going to do over the next few years?
Fixing the foundations springs to mind, doesn't it? I'm a considerate constructor. You can just hear Starmer saying it.
Growth, Mike. Growth of mess. That's what it is. Growth of
absolutely. Chaos and all the rest of it. Good to see you, Isabel. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott there, Talks international editor. It is mad, isn't it? Let's talk to Melissa in Cambridge, who's got some views on heat pumps for me, I think. Melissa, very good morning to you.
Morning to you, Mike.
What can I do for you?
I just wanted to advise a few people about the air source heat pumps, and this is from experience. So we had an air source heat pump. The reason we had one was because we had an eco house.
Oh, yeah.
So it
What's
was
an eco house?
It was really well insulated, highly insulated. The air source heat pump engineer, who was one of the first 100 engineers to be trained, said that it only works on eco houses that are really well insulated. It doesn't work on old properties. The bad thing about them, they're really noisy, extremely noisy. And I can tell you this from experience.
Like, sort of, what sort of noise do you hear? Is it like a hairdryer or something?
It's like a really loud fan.
Really?
Yes, and also it kills your plants, because when it first goes on, it blows out, a massive amount of air, warm air, and it kills all your plants that are next to it. Killed all mine. And the other thing as well, which is, I thought, the worst thing, in the summer when your heating's off, but if it's heating up your hot water, it dumps the excess hot water in your radiators, and it becomes boiling hot.
Doesn't sound like a very good system, does it? And so was it already in your house when you moved in then?
Yes, but they then changed it for a newer version, which, I mean, the previous one was massive. It was huge. And the newer one that we had fitted was a smaller one. I won't say what it was, but it was a smaller one.
But you still need quite a big space outside, don't you, to put it?
It takes up so much space because it has to sit on a massive piece of concrete to begin with. And it is huge. And if you've got plants next to it, they're going to die because all it does, it kills them. And they're noisy. They're so noisy. Ours was below our bedroom, and it would keep us awake all night.
Wow.
You could hear it. And the other thing is, in the summer, when you're really hot, it dumps the water in the radiators, and it's really hot.
So the house is really hot in the summer and not hot enough in the winter. Brilliant.
Yes.
That's great. So what about now? Have you got rid of it now, or have you moved?
Oh, I've got a gas. I've moved. I've got a gas.
Right, too. Very sensible woman.
Brilliant. I love it.
I know. Yeah, turn it on, you get hot air and hot water, and you turn it off and you don't. It's great.
And
Melissa,
it's cheaper.
Really well done. Thank you for calling. Melissa there has had a heat pump experience. Doesn't sound very good, does it? I mean, they're too noisy, apparently, for Houses of Parliament. And they're in the middle of London. So what if you live in a nice quiet street and you've got something that sounds like a van running next door all night? Can't be good, can it? Here's one from Brad in Cambridge. He says, Mike, Starmer is just trying to reinvent himself with the image of his puppet master Blair, an international mover and shaker with dreams of a latter career in the EU. Yeah, probably. And here from Stuart. Mike, Europe is in civil war in all but name, so our defence spending needs increasing and focusing on the enemy and our shores. The number of daily knife attacks and bombs are over 100 daily. Stuart, I know. This is the thing. And when you talk to some of these people like Sir Gerald Howarth, who doesn't quite understand what the people of this country think and want, nobody in this country wants the war to continue. Nobody wants us to continue to give money to Ukraine for time immemorial, for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. How long is it supposed to go on for? We'll talk about migrants. We'll talk about the dangers on our own shores that Keir Starmer should be protecting. Coming up next with Stephen Wolfe.
King Charles. Apparently he's going to be deployed on a charm offensive mission to the United States.
Donald Trump is a royalist. As we saw during his presidential election campaign, he was very happy to share pictures of his state visit with the Queen. He is at heart a bit of an Anglophile, for whatever he may be saying about members of the Labour Party and his team saying about members of the Labour Party. At heart, he's a bit of an Anglophile, and he's very much a royalist.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Just over half an hour to go. Alex Phillips is going to be here all week in for Julie Hartley-Brewer. It's half term, of course. The sun's shining, at least. I hope it's going to be shining where you are. Apparently, by the end of the week, it's going to be 17 degrees, ladies and gentlemen, which is quite remarkable. Stuart from Chester says this: the only person talking about war is Mr Starmer. Therefore, he is surely inciting violence. Everyone else is talking about peace talks and putting together a plan to get everyone around a table. At least President Trump has started the process towards peace instead of fueling the invasion by throwing taxpayers' money at it. Well, speaking of invasions, let's talk to Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, because, of course, we're now learning that more than 25,000 people have come here since Labour got into power. Another 240 illegal migrants came on small boats on, they call them small boats, they're not really, on Saturday. Let's find out what on earth is going on. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Mike.
A lot of people saying to me this morning, you know, forget about arming Ukraine, forget about paying for the bill for continuing a war with Russia. How about we fix what's going on in our own country first?
Oh, I couldn't agree more with those people, Mike, because quite frankly, when you look at the numbers that have arrived this year, which are higher for this same time last year and the year before, you are going to be looking at roughly around the cost, just in its first year, Mike, just in the first year for these people, of around £60 million. Right. So this is edging towards another record year of how much we spend for illegal migrants to cross the Channel, ignoring the amounts that we pay to the French. So the British people can be exceedingly angry that by the end of this year, we'll probably be spending another £8 billion on asylum and immigration into this country. It should be spent on ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely right. Or at least, at the very least, you should at least prioritise fixing Britain before you start worrying about Ukraine. I mean, there are lots of people at the moment who are saying to me, particularly, you know, military men, saying, you know, we have to be very careful. There are lots of countries that are very nervous around, you know, the borders of Russia, some of the Balkan states and all the rest of it, the Baltic states. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, Starmer has never seen a sort of a migrant story that he's fixed. He's never sorted the problems of knife crime on the streets of this country. He's never sorted the problems of Islamic terror. And yet, here we are, stumping up a load of money to help what would appear to be a complete and utter stalemate war.
Absolutely, and I agree, and I've said it for a long time now, we should stop the murders of innocent young men, both on Russia and in terms of Ukraine, for what is really a land grab by very large corporates. As we know, BlackRock is really big into Ukraine. The US government is saying now, under Trump, that they're investigating large numbers of companies that are seeking to make mass profits out of Ukraine. So one wonders whether that was the real reason. But even if you ignore that, and just let's go to the question of poverty. Even with the sanctions, one looks at a poverty rate in Russia of around 12 to 13%. Yet here it's 21%, Mike. Yeah. So people are quite right to say we should be looking after our own. And that is why people are turning away from the argument that we should even fight for Britain. It's shocking. Yeah. I saw the reports last week. But people are now saying we don't want to fight for this country because the country is not fighting for us.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, it's about priorities, as we say, you know, and, you know, we've got a ridiculous Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who last night was busy tweeting about the Congo and banging on about, you know, how they have to stop going to war. You know, completely irrelevant. They're trying to flog off the Chagos Islands, which nobody in the Chagos Islands wants them to do. The Mauritians, who are part of the deal, are apparently more corrupt than the Ukrainians are. You know, we want to hand them a bunch of money. I've got a friend who's from Mauritius, and he said, I wouldn't be giving them any money whatsoever in Mauritius because they'll just spend it on luxury homes in the south of France and Switzerland.
Well, yes, at least Lammy is talking about the Congo rather than doing the Congo. I'm not sure which is worse in my own memory of mine thinking about that, because they're just ridiculous. I mean, they are not really concentrating on what people in this country are concerned about. People are concerned about, first of all, energy and heating costs. That is big for them. Next, it's housing costs. Yeah. Why are we paying so much on rent? And of course, both of them are related either to the war in Ukraine or immigration in terms of housing. Then we look at our roads, schools, infrastructure, immigration. Then we look at the taxation. We're now having to pay for both the immigration energy costs that are impacting our businesses. All of these are related. And I don't really care about Congo too much. I'd rather he cares about what's happening in Coventry, in what's happening in Manchester, in what's happening in Plymouth.
Right. Well, did you see the story as well at the weekend that Deliveroo have fired 100 of their drivers, right? Because, amazingly, they discovered that they were somehow misusing their licences to work for Deliveroo and sort of subletting, if you like, their bikes so that people who were uncharted illegal migrants could actually drive around and make some money. We've been telling people this for months and months and months, and every time we mention it, you get sort of legal letters from companies go, oh, this is not, you can't say this about our company, it's not right. Well, it is right, and everybody knows it's right, and, you know, it's almost like, you know, you have to sort of wave some kind of, you know, loud banging machine in front of their eyes before they actually see what's happening before them.
Well, this is the nonsense. When you have over 1 million people in this country that are illegal migrants, or in terms of since 2000, nearly 1.3 million people who've come over to this country that's claimed asylum, we know that the black economy grows. We've had reports from the police who have said now that they've arrested and charged people in Aberystwyth for related crimes to illegal migration, and then they're opening up barbershops. We've seen the huge growth of barbershops, and now we have the report from the Home Office that they went in and sought out 6,000 people for illegal nail shops and barbershops. You were talking about this on your shows for years before this actually happens. It takes them so long to realise that the black economy is related to mass immigration caused by illegal migration. Stop that, and you stop it further down the chain. It's logical. It's common sense.
Well, I've got some news for you, so you can expect to read this in about 3 years' time from some government official, right? Because the barber shops have decided that, you know, they're all very well, but they can't actually fake generate that much money because they're only cutting people's hair. So the new one, if you want to look out for this on your high street, is a dental practice, a private dental practice which does cosmetic dentistry, because that's a business you can charge a lot more money for, so they can siphon a whole lot more drug money through it, and nobody's going to ask any questions. You know, you can put 50 grand a month through one of those, but you can't really do more than about 10 in a barber shop.
Well, I'm going to be watching out for that, Mike, and see if there are any strong MPs in the House of Commons who are going to follow this up and force our government to address it. But I doubt it very much, because they're unable to stop the boats, they're unable to stop the gangs, and they're unable to stop illegal immigration and the crime that comes with it.
And now Starmer thinks he can stop Russia. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? You know,
no,
brilliant.
Can't.
Absolutely. Stephen, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. It is ridiculous, isn't it? Bernard says, if Starmer's going to send troops to Ukraine, will he need the approval of Parliament? Well, I think he will. And let's face it, I mean, everybody thinks he's very unwise to even mention it. Cheers. But Mark says this. Morning, Mike. My squadron went out to Bosnia under the UN, and then another change to NATO. It is depending on the threat levels, as the UN is berets and soft touch, peacekeeping only. NATO was when rules of engagement were more ready to fight, normally changed between tours if needed, as the UN had been attacked. Yeah, interesting point of view there, Mark. Thanks very much indeed. But I think any British troops going anywhere, I don't think they should, by the way, but if they were to, it would have to be under the auspices of either the UN or NATO. Surely, wouldn't it? Coming up, we're going to talk to Stephen O'Grady, legal officer at the Free Speech Union. I'm going to show you a clip from a sporting occasion over in America, which should tickle you as well. First, though, here's your chance to win some money. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:35. JD Vance, says Brian from Spain, gave the Europeans a collective kick in the backside, and it was wonderful to see the discomfort of the audience. I only wish Starmer had been there, says Brian. Keep kicking, Mike. And one from G in sunny East Anglia. He says, morning, Mike, if you want to wind up the viewers even more today, tell them to visit the procurement files on X, where they can find loads of other fantastic government spending. I've been fuming since I found it in January this year. It will give the Sun weeks of front pages. Well, I'll certainly pass that on to Harry Cole. It may well be that that's where he found some of this stuff, but it is extraordinary. And one from Nick, who says, listening to Harry Cole's, it's of no surprise we are sending billions overseas while our own people suffer. He should look closer to home if he really wants to get upset and see what the Scottish Government and their mates, the Refugee Council, are spending on their new Scots programme. Scandalous. People walk into the country and suddenly we are paying for their social events, PlayStations, gym memberships, etc. When are things going to change? Well, this is the trouble. You know, the state apparatus is full of these do-gooders who want to help other people. Nothing wrong with that, but do it with private money. Don't do it with public money. Don't do it with taxpayers' money. I don't want to pay for some migrant to be put up in a hotel. I don't want to pay for somebody to give him a free coat, or for the taxpayer to pay for some free food, or some free trainers, or a free phone. No. I would say if you want to do that, then you set up some kind of private foundation and they can pay. And we can be the judge of that, and maybe we can tax them and take it as if it's some kind of a perk of a job. Because if that was us getting free stuff from the place that we work, we would be taxed on it as if it was a perk of the job. 9:36.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:39. I'm Mike Graham with you until 10, of course, every single weekday morning. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, right here from 6 o'clock. Don't miss it. I know you don't want to get up quite so early as that if you haven't got to take the kids to school. But, you know, There's lots of things to be doing. We're going to talk in a moment to Stephen O'Grady, legal officer at the Free Speech Union. First, though, I found this at the weekend, and it's been a bit of a bugbear of the Canadians, if you like, from the day that Trump got in and before he even got in, when he was talking about possibly annexing Canada as the 51st state of America, and then talking about putting tariffs on them as well. So here's an ice hockey game between the USA and Canada. They got slightly out of hand. Check this out for you so you can see it, but just remarkable. I mean, it just shows you how angry people get about Donald Trump, and of course they get just as angry about J.D. Vance. Let's say very good morning to Stephen O'Grady. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
I thought that was a good way to set up the story of J.D. Vance and his trip to Munich last week, because he really did sort of set the cat amongst the pigeons. They're still whining. You can still hear the noise coming from Bavaria even as we speak.
Yes, absolutely. It's one way of conducting foreign policy, certainly. And I think metaphorically, it's more or less what Vance did to the assembled Euro blob in Munich.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's have a quick look at what he actually said.
It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants.
And of course, he also talked a lot about free speech being something the Western Europe certainly had kind of forgotten about.
Yes, absolutely. He identified it as one of the key security threats, in fact, facing Europe. That he said that, you know, China and Russia are what they are, but we need to be aware of undermining our own values as a Western civilization. And let's not forget, these are values that America was founded on, but they came across from the continent, from English traditions, from the French during the Revolution, the values of the Enlightenment. And he was essentially sending out a warning saying that we seem to be losing sight of those fundamentals, and without them, Western democracy is in real trouble, trouble indeed.
Absolutely. And it seems as though everyone in Europe is suffering from the same kind of disease. I mean, has it been has it been the creeping liberalisation, if you like, of the European Union?
I think it's more rigidity that we've seen, you know, ever since 2016 Brexit, when people had the temerity to vote in a way that the establishment didn't like. There are all sorts of things put out about, you know, Russian disinformation caused it, and there's not a shred of evidence that affected the vote one way or the other. But since then, as well as the rise of the great awakening, as we might say, we've seen an increased turning of the ratchet, more and more laws brought in to combat so-called misinformation, disinformation. That's across the European continent, on these islands as well. We've seen creeping advance of DEI and the wokeification of the workplace, and all of that casts an incredible chill over people's ability to express themselves online, at work, to each other in public, whatever it may be. Increasingly, it's just being shut down. At the Free Speech Union, you know, we've seen thousands of cases over the years since we were founded 5 years ago, and just recently in the papers we saw that there have been several hundred people who have now been locked up for things that they've said. We've noticed
that was a staggering number, though. I was really surprised.
It is. It's really extraordinary, and some of those are under the Online Safety Act, with its new offence of spreading disinformation or false information that could cause non-trivial harm. We've seen, since the new government came into power here, just over the last 6 months or so, we've seen a definite uptick in the number of criminal prosecutions against people for things that they've said. And it's not just the fallout from the Southport riots and so on. It's across the board. It could be to do with Islam. It could be gender critical stuff. Across the board, people are really very, very scared and mindful of what they say as a result.
Right. And no matter how many times the police are told, you know, you're not supposed to be following up these non-crime hate incidents, you're not supposed to be recording them anymore, they seem to be recording more than ever.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge problem with the regime. There's this statutory guidance that was released after the Harry Miller case, and the practices of the police were found to be unlawful. And the idea was that that statutory guidance would put them on a lawful footing for what they do. But it's emerged that a number of constabularies seem to disregard it, that they carry on. And even with the statutory guidance in place, there's serious questions about whether this is a useful use of police time to be investigating people for things that don't even amount to a crime, based purely on the perception of somebody who's taken offence at something and decided to ring the police up and make a complaint.
Yeah, it really is quite extraordinary as well. And also, you've got the Labour government seemingly more than happy for this to continue to sort of advance, right?
Yes, yeah, we've seen Yvette Cooper said that she wants to increase the recording of NCHIs, particularly as they apply to Islamophobia and to anti-Semitism. We've seen Angela Rayner is establishing this council on Islamophobia, potentially to implement the APPG definition of Islamophobia, which would really make it very difficult to criticise. You know, nobody believes that it's fair to denigrate somebody simply because of who they are or what they are. I think that's common ground. That's
yeah, but it shouldn't be illegal, though, should it?
A religion is fair game to criticise.
Right.
You know, that's a long-standing principle, and there's a real fear that it's going to become very, very difficult to criticise a particular religion in this country. Bringing back blasphemy laws by the back door, that's a serious concern.
Right. Presumably, if they did that, would they not then have to reconsider some of the things that they're doing around, for example, that guy who's been the centre of a massive row about praying outside an abortion clinic? Because, I mean, that would be presumably protected a right as Islamophobia would be.
Well, this is interesting. I mean, the abortion clinics situation is a very complex one. Undoubtedly, there are some free speech elements there. There's freedom to protest that's in play there, and that needs to be set against the liberty. You know, abortion in this country is lawful. People may agree or disagree. It has to be set against the rights of people to seek that sort of treatment. But there is a question over whether that sort of anti-blasphemy protection would be extended equally to all religions, or whether it is one religion in particular which would enjoy that protection whilst others are targeted.
Well, I think we know what the Labour government would like to do, but we'll have to keep fighting them, I'm afraid. Good to see you, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen O'Grady, legal officer at the Free Speech Union. Yeah, numbers of people who have been done and put in jail for things that they've thought or said seems remarkable to me. It's in the hundreds, isn't it? Ridiculous. 0344 499 1000. Stuart from Bradford said the next handout of clothing for the migrants should be army clothing. Send them across to Ukraine to do the job instead of our guys in the forces. Yeah, I can imagine that might be a bit problematic. Darren in Twickenham says if the West had shown the strength Trump has in his first few weeks, Putin would have been stopped at a fraction of the cost and time. They bottled it, making minimum gestures, and Putin knows it. Exactly right. I mean, all these people who are kind of moaning and groaning about the fact that Donald Trump's trying to get a peace deal done really can't see the wood for the trees, can they? They don't actually understand the way the world works. They just hate Donald Trump so much that they can't believe that anything he suggests is a good idea. That's part of the problem, isn't it? Coming up, we'll take your calls. We'll hear more from Sir Gerald Howarth, who we spoke to earlier on, about the whole Ukraine situation. This is Talk.
King Charles. Apparently he's going to be deployed on a charm offensive mission to the United States.
Donald Trump is a royalist. As we saw during his presidential election campaign, he was very happy to share pictures of his state visit with the Queen. He is at heart a bit of an Anglophile, for whatever he may be saying about members of the Labour Party and his team saying about members of the Labour Party. At heart, he's a bit of an Anglophile, and he's very much a royalist.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. Just about 8 minutes to go. Alex Billets will be here. She's in for Julie Hartley-Brewitt all week. It is half term. The sun is shining. What else can you do? You can listen to this show and talk, of course, throughout the day. The home of common sense. Earlier on, we had Sir Gerald Howarth on to talk to about Ukraine. He's a former defence minister and Tory MP. Here's how it went. Listen, you're allowed to disagree with me. I welcome it. The point is we're pledging to give Ukraine £3 billion a year for the rest of time, while at the same time we've got a country which apparently is bankrupt, which we keep being told has no money whatsoever, and people in this country who vote for the government, who want the government to keep them safe in their own country, who are failing to do so, quite frankly, because people are getting stabbed to death every day on the streets of this country, and have other priorities. And I know that you're speaking as somebody with a great knowledge of what's happened before, and with great knowledge of defence and all of that. But what I'm saying is that, you know, the people of this country are ready to see this all come to an end. And quite frankly, you know, whatever that end is, well, you might go out and talk to some people on the street, because they do.
I'm afraid there are other people in this country who recognise that this has the hallmarks of the 1930s, and that if we do not stand firm now, we will pay a massively heavy price in the future. So you can forget any more money.
So your solution is to fight back against Russia, is it?
My view is that unless the tyrant is ejected from
but
Ukraine,
he's not being ejected by Ukraine, is he? Who's going to eject him?
We have to give more support, and I'm afraid the Republicans spent months and months refusing to support President Biden. And I have not much time for President Biden, but they spent months holding up a military aid package to Ukraine. And I asked a former national security advisor of the United States who'd worked alongside President Trump, and I asked him I said, why are our Republican friends not supporting the Biden package? And he said, Gerald, because they are ignorant.
No, it's not, because they knew the American people didn't want it, and that's why Trump got re-elected. Simple.
Because the American people, only 14% of them have passports. They don't understand.
Well, you're going to slag off the whole of America now. Yes, not the greatest argument, I have to say, for continuing a war with Russia, because all Americans are stupid, apparently. This is according to Sir Gerald Howarth. Let's get a quick call. Chris is in Epsom. Hi, Chris.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, sir. What can I do for you?
Right, I've phoned up to talk about Ukraine, but I'll just let you know I'm a member of the Free Speech Union, and it's actually 3,300 people have been jailed for hurty words.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Listen, Ukraine, Trump got elected because he's going to make America great again, and America first. He told Europe in his first presidential in 2016, he warned Europe, put your money up, you're not paying your money in.
He did.
Right? He's got to look, if he's looking at making America great again, he's got to concentrate on Asia and the Far East, because he can't allow China to make a move. Now, China have been flying jets over the top of Taiwan. I mean, they are itching to go. What we've got to do is we should be, and Howarth is completely correct in one way. is that Putin wants to join up the coastline along the Black Sea, from Odessa to Mariupol to Crimea that he's already got. He's already got unbadged soldiers in Moldavia that have now claimed an independent state, the same as they did in the Donbass, which, in reflection, what Hal was saying, is the same as what Hitler did with the region in Czechoslovakia. Now, the thing is, if we don't, and Danit is right as well, if we do not rearm, right, and I mean immediately go to 3.5% and get to 5% within 2 years, we're going to be looking at a European-wide war, because Putin is not going to stop. His dreamboat is to recreate the USSR. And it doesn't matter, you know, the 7th Cavalry in the guise of Trump is not going to ride to the protection of Europe when we're not paying in our dues.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, Chris, about that. I still think the best option is to get them to sit down and have a peace talks conversation and then go from there. John's in Dorset. Quickly, John, sorry.
Quick stat, Mike. 181,500 serving personnel, 98,000 in the Army. Total Navy, 62,000. Navy and Air Force, 62,800. Civil servants, 68,700. And there's the answer.
Yeah.
Home Office, 40,000 civil servants.
Right. The state's too big. It's just too big. They've allowed it to expand, and it's got all out of proportion. So we haven't got a big enough army, and we haven't got big enough defence, and we need to make it bigger. It's as simple as that. John, thanks very much indeed. Alex Phillips is here in all week for Ms. Hartley Brewer. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So we've been talking about Ukraine a lot this morning because people are not happy about the fact that certain ministers in this country and in Europe want to keep this war going. They don't seem to want it to stop, do they?
Well, what's so mad is there's so many different positions, there's so many contradictions, and there's so much hypocrisy here. So I remember at the outbreak of the invasion, people saying, oh, we've got to build a golden bridge for Putin.
Right.
Oh, if you go after him like a cornered rat, he's going to lash back out.
Right.
And so Trump's going, OK, I'm going to go and speak to him. We've got to solve this thing once and for all. You can't do that. When Macron went and sat at the massive white table in the Kremlin, he was a hero.
Right.
If this was Biden or someone else, they'd be a hero.
Yeah, of course.
I think part of this is Trump derangement syndrome.
It is. A big part of it.
Yeah, the Europeans are sort of saying, right, we've got to carry on carrying on, but the Germans are still not giving their long-range missiles to Ukraine.
No.
The sanctions have been really slow because countries, especially like Germany, have been so intertwined with the Ukrainian economy.
Yeah.
Then in all of this, you've got conversations happening about a potential deal, of which we know no detail. People in the commentary are talking